All right, let's get it. Drive time. Monday afternoon, 12 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is a very aggressively April day outside. It's about 58, 60 degrees. We had a little rain this morning. Cloudy with a little bit of sunshine this afternoon here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts back behind the mic after a little Friday off, a little jaunt to San Diego with our little local soccer club over the weekend. RSL gets a win. We'll get into a little soccer on the show today. But there's a lot to do. The Monday after the NFL draft, we kind of lean heavy into that. So we'll talk NFL draft from a local standpoint. Kind of a quiet year. We've talked about it for a few months now. Was not expecting Jalen Royals and Caleb Lohner to be the only two names that we heard called throughout the course of the NFL draft, but that's where we're at. We'll update you on the local college football players that were able to sign some unrestricted free agent, or I should say undrafted free agent deals, and some minicamp invites too. Of course, the big story today is Shedeur Sanders sliding all the way to the fifth round of the draft after a lot of midseason college football projections had him both as a finalist for the Heisman Trophy and the favorite in Vegas at one point to be the number one overall pick. That, of course, ended up being Cam Ward. So we'll do some NFL today. We'll do some NFL draft today. We'll do some college football today on the program as well. The latest with the NCAA transfer portal. Zach Williams is on his way to USC. What will the University of Utah do at that wide receiver position as the transfer portal has come and gone? Now, there will be more opportunities to add talent prior to the start of the season in the fall. So we will get to that. NBA playoffs have been awesome. They've just been so much fun. And they continue tonight with, well, one good game tonight. I don't think Miami has a pulse. I think they are cooked. Of course, down 3-0. You know, the math on that. It's never happened in pro basketball before. Donovan's been really good, man. Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers will march on, I think, tonight to the second round. We'll see if Miami can get one in their arena. And then series that a lot of people are tuned into with the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. Reports are that Jimmy Butler went through shoot-around this morning and may give it a go tonight after he sat in Game 3. We had a vintage Stephen Curry performance. One of my favorite things about this NBA playoffs is a lot of the old guard has shown that they're still doing their thing, even at advanced ages like Steph. But an old guard that might be done, it's not his fault. LeBron James and the LA Lakers are in trouble. I don't know if J.J. Redick was trying to send a point to Rob Pelinka and the LA Laker front office staff by not sitting any of his starters in the second half. He played the same five-man unit. Timberwolves are deep. You can't do that against Minnesota. LeBron ran out of gas. Luka got tired. Even Dorian Finney-Smith had a wide-open dunk, and he short-armed it. So the Lakers on the brink of elimination. Boston Celtics, no issues with the Orlando Magic. Some competitive games, but that one's over. The Knicks have a 3-1 series lead against Detroit. That's been kind of an unexpected, fun, testy back and forth. After splitting at the Garden, New York goes to Detroit, and they get 2. And the Indiana Pacers have been a really good team since the All-Star break, so this series is not surprising me. But unfortunately, the storyline coming out of Indianapolis against Milwaukee is that our local legend, Damian Lillard, might be done. I hate to say it, but the news became official about 2 hours ago. After an MRI, it is official that Dame has torn his left Achilles tendon. Dame turns 35 this offseason. And even if you're 21, 22, that is an injury that's really difficult to come back from. He is on the books for a cool, wait for it, $60 million next year. I don't know what Milwaukee does. They're cooked. A lot of conversation about maybe they look to move on from Giannis. Let me just say this into this microphone. The Utah Jazz will not be making the deal for Giannis because that's not realistic. So if we could stop sending out silly tweets and such, that would be great. But speaking of the Utah Jazz, we are high speed ahead to the next date of intrigue, which is May the 12th, when the Jazz will find out their lottery luck, and fingers crossed, knocking on wood, hopefully it's the number one pick, and hopefully we have Cooper Flagg playing basketball in our city coming up next year. Be awesome. So, lot to do. Jam-packed show. Busy show. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great, great weekend full of a bunch of NBA hoops, full of some RSL soccer, some NFL drafts, maybe a little golf, and maybe you got outside a little bit too. The weather is very spring-like. We've not had a very sunny, warm spring. Hopefully the consistent sunshine is on its way. All right, our first guest today, excited for this, Matt Brown, who writes the newsletter Extra Points. It's kind of a North Star for me. Utilize it to prep for the show with the business of college football. So we'll talk to Matt about how's first NCAA settlement, kind of where we're at with that structure and when we could see something final and what it means for the world of collegiate athletics, namely college football. Richard Smith will do a little Jazz basketball, a little off-season, a little NBA draft, a little playoff basketball with Smitty today live in studio. Thor Nystrom stops by. Excited to catch up with Thor. His name is Thor, so you can guess that he's a football guy. We'll do some NFL draft with Thor on the program today. And then we'll welcome in a special guest. I've never had an opportunity to interview Sam Junqua before. Sam scored a great goal for RSL over the weekend. Diego had a brace. Diego continues to see that star of his shine and rise, but Sam had the goal to kind of put the cap on it as RSL got a 3-1 win against San Diego over the weekend. So, Matt Brown, Richard Smith, Thor Nystrom, Sam Junqua, me, Spence Checketts. Hello, how are you? Happy Monday, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, who held the fort down on Friday with Andy Larson. How'd the Friday show go?
I thought it went pretty good.
It's not what I heard.
It went fun.
It's not what I heard.
It went well.
It's not what I heard.
It was Andy and I, notable, fun guys who love fun things, right?
You and Andy,
optimists of the ultimate kind.
You're the
me and
exact
Andy.
opposites. The two of you are curmudgeons.
That's kind of what I was saying, but
it went okay. You guys had a good time.
It did go well. I thought so. I even got Andy to talk some NFL draft. Obviously, the bulk of the show was NFL draft, NBA playoffs, but we had plenty to talk about on a Friday that had live action. We talked about the coverage of the NFL draft and the live stuff there, and had plenty of NBA playoffs to talk about. So it was fun with Andy. Always good to catch up with him, talking RSL and whatnot. And we'll do the same today. Before
we get into it, you're a football guy,
big time.
What do you think happened for real? What do you think happened with Shedeur? Why do you think he slid all the way to the fifth round?
First off, and not to like hot take, not a huge surprise. It was a slide. It was a surprise to see him taken in the fifth round. But the 144th pick in the NFL draft is kind of relative to being like a top 150 college football player. He was 13-11 at Colorado. Yes, he's really talented. But when you're talking about the next level, Spence, from the NFL draft standpoint, you're talking about pocket presence. You're talking about your ability to talk through a playbook with guys in an NFL room. You're talking about a whole different class of things. And, we can talk about the entitlement stuff, the stuff with Dion, but ultimately it doesn't sound like they really handled the process that well. They actually told almost half the teams in the league to not draft Shedeur. Dion and Shedeur told them not to draft him. That is a specific request that has been kind of confirmed through multiple sources, and then they publicly put out like which teams they were okay with. So number one, you're doing a disservice there, and then when you start to slide, Spence, it's not just about the one guy. Quinn Ewers, a bunch of quarterbacks slid in this draft because it was a heavy offensive line, defensive back, defensive tackle in the middle of the draft. But when no one else is picking quarterbacks, you don't make that pick. So it wasn't as surprising as I think the firestorm led out to be, because that's how everything with Dion, with the Sanders, with Shedeur is, and that's fine. But that's just kind of the reality of it. And yeah, 144th pick, hell, that's some guy's dream. That's most people's dream. And I think it's okay to say that out loud. Awesome human feat and achievement. 144th pick.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll get into it. Of course, the hot takes have been flying all day. Some of the same media members that were very confident in their intel on Wednesday of last week that Shedeur would be a top 10 pick or a first-round pick are now talking about how confident they are in their intel about why they got it wrong. I always find the autopsy that certain media members do about the draft pretty funny after the fact. But our first guest today will be Matt Brown. But before we get to Matt on this lovely Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
You can cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash today. You can turn those playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series. Starting with the play-in round, every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Take-Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1, a VIP trip to the ship. So here's what you do. You download the Prize Picks app today. You use that promo code ESPN700 at checkout, and you get $50 when you place that first $5 bet. You do not even need to win your $5 bet. The $50 is on the house. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700, and you're going to get $50 when you play that first $5 bet. Tonight, I'm going more for Max Strus, 2.5 three-point shots made. I'm going more for Jalen Green, 18.5 points. I'm going less on Stephen Curry, 5.5 assists. And I'm going more for Donovan Mitchell, 25.5 points. So check it out. That's how I'm rolling tonight. You guys can play along. All right. So, of course, the big story over the weekend was Shedeur Sanders sliding to the 5th round of the NFL draft after a lot of people believe that he could even maybe be a top 3 pick to the New York Giants. The New York Giants, by the way, traded back into the first round to take our local product, Jackson Dart, who will sit behind Russell Wilson and maybe Jameis Winston for a year or two. So very happy for Jackson Dart, his family, of course, local people. Some of the other local high school kids were drafted. But as far as the local college kid, and by high school kids, I mean the Jeffrey Bossa kid from Oregon, Jackson Hawes, the former Highland High tight end. But on Wednesday of last week, I did not anticipate sitting here on Monday of this week to talk about Caleb Lohner and Jalen Royals as the only 2 local players having been drafted. Caleb's going to go to Denver, as is Karene Reed, by the way. Denver's kind of like the Utah NFL team out this way. Buffalo kind of the team out back east. So happy for certainly Caleb Lohner. We heard Sean Payton talk a lot about his athleticism after the draft process. So some of the other players that have found deals, Junior Tafuna will be a Texan, undrafted deal. I mentioned Karene Reed's going to Denver. Connor O'Toole got himself almost $300,000 as far as the undrafted contract he signed with Seattle. Zamiah Vaughn will be in Minnesota, and Mekhi Bernard, I believe, will be with the Browns or the Bills. Mekhi got a deal. Tyler Batty's going to Minnesota. Caleb Etienne will be a Bengal, and then Jacob Robinson will be a 49er. So no BYU players drafted, and only Caleb Lohner drafted from the U. Jalen Royals, the speedy wide receiver, has himself a new home. So Mekhi's in Tennessee. Thank you, Porter. So Mekhi got an undrafted deal with Tennessee. So Jalen Royals will be catching passes from Patrick Mahomes and playing for Andy Reid. But real quick, I couldn't help but think about this as the Shedeur Sanders storyline played out. And yes, Mel Kiper, ESPN, they're going to force feed all of us these stories that maybe isn't as interesting for some as it is for others. But as he was sliding and all of the videos were kind of surfacing online of people with hot takes about him sandbagging interviews and how, famously his father, Deion Sanders, admitted throughout his career that he sandbagged interviews because he didn't want to go certain places. The problem is Shedeur is not you, Deion. Deion, still to this day, by many, is considered the greatest cornerback that ever played pro football, and also an incredibly electric punt and kick returner. Like, if you're that good, you can sandbag and get away with it. But if you're kind of borderline with traits that people debate about whether or not you're actually a legitimate NFL prospect, you better handle every intangible the best possible way you can. Like, if you're LeBron James, you can show up for a free agency meeting, you can down a bottle of wine and pontificate on random weird stuff, and it doesn't matter. You're LeBron James. We're going to sign you no matter what. But if you're a mid-tier free agent and you have to knock an interview out of the park in order to get a deal, you better act right, man. And when it comes to all of these interviews that apparently, as Porter was outlining, Shedeur, some of them, he just refused to show up in person. He would do it on Zoom. I guess there was a comment that he said, if you don't want to change your culture, then don't get me or whatever. And he's just not good enough to not act right with the things that have to be dialed in for a prospect that has a lot of questions for a lot of people. But last year, Big 12 Media Day, we're in Vegas for our first foray into Big 12 media experience because it's the first year that Utah was in the conference. We're sitting there on Radio Row, and, we're doing our best to get all these interviews with coaches and players. And, In the background, there's the dais and the podium where coaches would address the entire group. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the double doors opened with the entrance. And, the Big 12 did a really great job. They had these Vegas, showgirls at the entrance. They had these Vegas, slot machine feel. And you didn't really pay much attention to who was walking in and walking out until the double doors open and 6 cameras are following Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, and Shiloh, Deion's other son. And they make their way throughout the course of kind of the setup, and every school had a helmet set up on one of these kind of situations where they were introducing everybody to each other. There was a setup, I think they were doing it with a video game where they had all the uniforms on dummies, and so you could walk through that. And Shedeur and Shiloh, every 3 to 5 minutes or whatever, they would stop, look at their cameras, and they do one of these dopey TikTok dances that all the kids do to post and get engagement and get videos. And I don't mean to sound like the old guy that's yelling about what the young kids do with this social media stuff, where it's all about engagement instead of anything entertaining or anything of truth or of substance. It's all about eyeballs. And it's all about entertainment, it's all about engagement. That's all it's about. That's why you see people like the Paul brothers doing ridiculously dumb things in order to get attention. And yes, all these people are making a lot of money, and good for you. Go get your bag. I'm not a hater that way. But it was a circus at Big 12 Media Day just to watch Deion and his 2 kids walk into the facility, let alone what they're doing throughout the course of the season or what they're doing throughout the course of the draft process. I mean, I can't speak for any NFL general manager about how they feel about having to deal with a circus with a prospect that isn't considered to be a home run. That's what I think a lot of people are missing. Even a lot of the analysts that thought Shedeur should be a first-round pick or even higher than that, maybe a top 10 pick, all talked about maybe the lack of size, or he's only played for his dad his entire career, or are there entitlement, attitude issues. This was not Peyton Manning coming out of Tennessee. This was not Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford. This was not a can't-miss prospect. Shedeur had a lot of questions that a lot of very smart football people brought up. And because of that, if you add the circus to the questions, I'm not really surprised that we saw him slide. I'm surprised that we saw him slide to the 5th round. I think a lot of people figured Cleveland with that first pick in the 2nd round was sitting pretty, or Pittsburgh, who badly needs quarterback help throughout the course of their mid-round picks. But to slide all the way down to the 5th round just has to indicate that it's not just the questions about who he is as a player. You do not want a backup quarterback who's also part of the circus. I mean, as a Jets fan, and Tim Tebow and Shedeur are much different people and much different players, but as a Jets fan, when Tebow was in New York, it was wild because Tim Tebow had this thing where he was the celebrity. He was the main act, even though he was not a good NFL quarterback. But he goes to Denver, and actually they've got a nasty defense, a good run game. They were able to win some games to go to the playoffs, so all the Tebow supporters were like, see, told you, Jesus lives. And all the Tebow haters are like, okay, just wait. It's not going to work because he's not very good at it. It didn't change anybody's mind about who Tim Tebow was. But from an organizational standpoint, that has to bring a lot of headaches. Johnny Manziel, after he lost his starting job and became the celebrity backup, only caused issues. So when you do the math here a little bit, I don't think it's that much of a surprise that he did slide. I think it is a surprise that he slid all the way to the 5th round. And now we'll see if he uses this as juice and motivation and fuel to prove a lot of people wrong. But from a local standpoint, a quiet NFL draft cycle, hopefully that is not anything that lasts consistently. All right, we'll do a bunch of college football coming up on the other side with Matt Brown. Then we're going to bring in Richard Smith, Thor Nystrom for some NFL draft, and Sam Junqua, the RSL goal scorer over the weekend. We've got a busy Monday show, so don't go anywhere. All right, we got Smitty live in studio. Richard Smith, who spent 40 years with Utah Jazz. We'll do some Jazz basketball, some lottery, some playoffs. Going to do some NFL draft later on. Do some RSL with Sam Junquo, who scored a goal over the weekend. But one of our favorites bats leadoff on this Monday afternoon. Matt Brown writes the college athletics, but a football-heavy newsletter, Extra Points, that we use on the show quite a bit. Matt, happy Monday, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's sunny. It's 80 degrees here in Chicago. There's no way I could possibly be upset, even if it means that I'm going to be writing a lot this week about legal stuff.
I know you will, and we'll get into it. I've got to give you my hot Chicago take, though. It's my favorite summer city in America, and then on either side of summer, I'm like, I got to get out. I got to do something else.
I mean, I've lived here for close to a decade now. I don't think that's a hot take. Most people who live here think the same thing. From May until September, I think it's the best place in the entire country, and it's good enough that I still want to live here. But in January, and I've lived most of my life in the Midwest, I still want to walk in front of a truck by the end. And it's not just because it's like 6 degrees, because it's less of that now. It's just you don't see the sun.
Right.
Even every time I land in Utah and step outside the plane, it's like, oh yeah, it turns out my body does need vitamin D to like not want to die. I understand why people are happier here. That's part of it.
No, for sure. When the weather warms up, you're like, I'm not depressed. I'm just cold. So now I feel I feel better now. I feel better now. All right, Matt. I'm just 30,000-foot viewpoint here. Like, where are we at with House v. NCAA? Like, what's the timeline and what's the latest? What should we know as of today on this Monday?
Well, as of today, there's been a little bit of a wrinkle, right? Like over the last, honestly, 6+ months. Almost everybody at the highest levels of college athletics, in the power conferences and in conference offices, have been operating on the assumption that this settlement is going to get approved essentially as is in early April. And all the revenue sharing NIL deals that have gone out to athletes in the last recruiting class and a lot of like vendor hires, have been pretty explicit like this. All of this is contingent upon the settlement being approved. And then last week, Judge Wilkins says, if you guys don't fix this roster limit issue that I've pointed out now multiple times, I'm going to blow up the settlement. So what we have now is that the plaintiffs counsel and the NCAA and the power conference folks have to get together and they have to make a decision. Do we want to blow up this settlement and take this thing to trial, where if we lose, the liability for the NCAA and major conferences is $12 billion, which I believe would essentially liquidate the NCAA. Do we want to roll the dice on court, or do we want to grandfather in roster limits and figure out some sort of way to make restitution to the athletes that have been harmed by our refusal to grandfather in roster limit clauses? And on the surface, you would think, well, that's an easy decision. Of course you should grandfather in the roster limits. Why are we going to let the 31st person on a track roster blow this whole thing up? But as we wrote today, it actually gets pretty messy because a lot of athletes got cut last year. And you might have some people that are on other schools now entirely or maybe out of the game. And do you let them back in? Do you allow a waiver to let some Olympic sport athletes potentially compete for 2 schools in 1 calendar year? You might have to if you want to comply with this ruling. We're going to find out in a little over a week what they decide to do.
A little over a week. So can we finally say we actually have like a hard deadline, like a drop dead date? Is that what we're expecting now?
I'm going to have to go double check on my computer for the exact date. But in Wilkins' letter last week, it was you got 14 days. Figure this out so we can finally crap or get off the pot. I would still be pretty surprised if this settlement is not approved, but given the way the NCAA and power conference attorneys have kind of acted over the last couple of months, I can't say it's 0%.
Yeah, and that's why I followed up because, every day, I mean, you're one of my first stops because we utilize a lot of the stuff you write for the show. And then I try to see if Ross has anything, the usual suspects. And it seems like all you guys that are plugged in are doing the best you can to nail down a date, but it seems to be fluid. Is there any part of you that's surprised that we are sitting here now looking May right in the face in the next few days and we are still dealing with all this ambiguity?
I'm a little surprised, and I probably shouldn't be. One thing that was just reiterated to me by so many athletic directors over February and March, whether they were at big schools or small schools, was we don't know what's going on, right? We are intellectually aware of this settlement. Charlie Baker sent out a couple of messages, but honestly, we hear about it from you or from Ross or from Nicole often before we do anybody in Indianapolis, and that's just because all of this is being done by a handful of attorneys, some of whom who don't are outside counsel. And I think it was pretty clear that the folks that were doing the negotiating over the House settlement were not plugged in and didn't really care all that much about softball players or soccer players or how any of this stuff might affect Utah Valley University. And it turns out the judge has felt a little bit differently about that. So if you were going to limit your decision making and your inputs to this very small group of people and this very small class of athletes, there are a lot of problems here that I think could have been addressed a couple of months ago and are not. That's sort of the story of the NCAA, though.
For college football fans, fans of collegiate athletics, but mainly, college football fans and college basketball too, both of the revenue generators have been adversely affected. What would you say as far as what's realistic to hope and expect once this is across the line? Like on the scale of there will still be a ton of chaos on one end of the spectrum, and this will finally bring guidelines and guardrails on the other end of the spectrum that will clean this stuff up. What's realistic to expect pretty quickly after this is across the line?
I think if and when this is settled, what I would tell fans is now you can have some measure of structure for the next academic year. And honestly, that's about all I would say. The folks at Indianapolis and at the power conferences were really hoping that this settlement would create something of a de facto CBA that would provide cost certainty and structure over the next decade and protection from additional litigation. At this point, I think there's no chance of that happening. As soon as this is done and dusted, there will be 3 other lawsuits ready to go to challenge this on Title IX consideration, to challenge this from the athletes that opted out and still want another crack at the antitrust pinata. And the second that Deloitte or whoever ends up kind of functioning as this intermediary clearinghouse tries to invalidate a bagman deal, they're going to be in federal court 2 weeks later. So there's going to be some stability just because millions of dollars of contracts have been sent out that are contingent upon this thing happening in July. But I can't tell you what's going to happen in 2027. Your athletic director and your football coach can't tell you. And I think anybody that says they absolutely can is selling you something.
Okay, so let's move over here because I feel like, I don't know, Matt, maybe you've been coming on the show for 4 or 5 years, and after NIL and transfer portal became a reality, and it was clear that administrators and leaders had failed everybody because there wasn't anything that was prepared as far as, okay, now we know that this is the reality, but here's how it's going to work. Here are the mechanisms, okay? And none of that was in place, which has led to a ton of chaos in sports that we all love. And I've asked you at different stops whether or not we are at some point going to move into a reality of college athletics looking very much like professional athletics, and the players will be able to unionize and they will be able to collectively bargain with whatever the governing body looks like. And will there be a commissioner? Will college football look like the NFL? Will college basketball look like the NBA? And, a smart guy like you has been able to help us understand based off of, the Trump administration and changes they're going to make, how, things have changed in that direction. Where are we at now as far as your belief of what I know you just said you don't know what 2027 is going to look like, but my opinion, Matt, is the only thing that will settle most of the issues that are causing the chaos is a pro model. I still believe that to be true. Do you think at some point we are going to see that, whenever that is?
My opinion on this, I think, is pretty different from most of my national reporter colleagues. And they may very well be right. Maybe this is me being, too much of a chicken little or something. But I legitimately think there is a better than 50% chance that this Congress passes some sort of college sports bill. Now, that bill may be something that every single economist and agent and lawyer on Twitter absolutely hates. It might be a bill that I really don't like. But I think there is more momentum and a political coalition that's more equipped to make that happen than there has been over the past couple of years. In my professional opinion, like the dirty little secret is whether you want a collective bargaining agreement and athletes as employees and a union and that kind of structure, or whether you want to try to roll this thing back to 1997 and give the schools a lot more empowerment to enforce amateurism rules, either of those solutions is going to require Congress. Because right now, the NCAA is not empowered to make or enforce virtually any kind of rule without the court system ruling and chipping away at it. So I don't look at that and necessarily think that was lack of administrator leadership. The lack of administrator leadership was probably more in 2007 than in 2024. But you could come up with the best plan in the world. I can sit out here and I can write a 3,000-word compromise that a lot of people would agree with tomorrow. And a second it's enforced, it's going to get smacked down on antitrust grounds. I personally think that there are 60 votes in the U.S. Senate to pass something that says, okay, we're going to give the NCAA a limited and conditional antitrust exemption to enforce some of these rules, and we're going to say that college football players cannot be employees, and that designation only is true if the NCAA commits to X, Y, Z, and we can reassess it every 2 or 3 years. And it's going to make a lot of trial lawyers pretty angry. But that might be the most reasonable, like the easiest path here, because I mean, you know this even better than I do locally, right? There's a lot of states that don't allow or don't want collective bargaining for public employees. And if you're in a place where you're not going to let the firefighters and the cops and the teachers do it, you're not going to let middle linebackers do it either.
Okay, so let's operate off the hypothetical that what you just outlined will be the direction. Do you agree with the direction? Is that what you would like to see happen for the sport? Do you think that's the right move? Because I maintain, Matt, that I will stay on the Hill where I do think the right move is the pro model. I mean, if players sign contracts, at least they're on campus for a couple of years. If there is a salary cap, and I'm using professional terms, then maybe it does even the playing field a little bit. And, of course, there's always money paid in nefarious ways, but that's not new. That's been going on forever. So if there is a salary structure, a salary cap, and contracts where players are on campus for a couple of years, I believe that to be the right route. If the congressional bill that you're talking about is the route, do you think that will go a long way to alleviate some of the issues that we always talk about?
I think the bill that's coming is something that's going to be written by Ted Cruz. And I admit I am generally not the kind of person who's going to go and say with my full chest, I love this bill that Ted Cruz wrote. Or that Senator Lee is also going to support. I'm sure we agree on some things.
Yes,
but
we do.
It's probably a smaller list. And my understanding, because I've heard about drafts of this bill, it's kind of circulated around and it's not really a secret anymore. It wouldn't look like that very much. Like it wouldn't move to that professional model. Like now, in my opinion, which I know makes for lousy sports radio, is I think it depends on the kind of athlete you're talking about. Like, do I think that professionalization and employment status and contracts of track athletes and Division I college athletics make sense? I'd say probably not. It's very rare that I run into somebody who wants that, and that model will probably lead to worse outcomes than what we have right now. Do I think that Big 12 football players and Big 12 basketball players should be employees and have a union and collectively bargain? I do, but I also am I don't say that with like deep authoritative absolutely, because I it's one thing to say we want collective bargaining when a union doesn't exist. It's another thing to have somebody on the other side of that table to do that negotiating, and that doesn't exist right now. And if it's created by management, by Congress, by Jim Cavale at athletes.org out of kind of fiat, I think it's going to get its butt kicked for the first several years, which is often what happened to athlete unions. So then it's like, okay, do I want something that will make my life easier as a reporter, my life easier as a fan, and will probably benefit my personal fandom? I went to Ohio State. I root for the bluest of the blue blood football programs. Like, it would probably benefit me, and hope that it would benefit athletes in 12 years, even if it sucks for people in the short term. That's harder. It's not a cop out, honest to God. Like I just don't think there's an easy answer out there. If there is, we probably would have done it by now.
So for college football and college basketball fans that cannot stand the fact that we no longer get to know these kids, we no longer get to the great Rick Majerus teams always had the Keith Van Horns and the Andre Millers and the Britton Johnsons that stayed until they were juniors and seniors. And you and I have talked about the dynamic of the best Utah football teams were comprised of kids that Coach Witt recruited that maybe weren't all that highly thought of and then developed into juniors and seniors and NFL players. And those have been the best Utah football and basketball rosters. I think it's pretty much the same thing with Brigham Young. So fans that cannot stand the fact that they're losing their favorite players every year, would you just say that you better get used to it because that's how it's going to be?
Probably, unless the BYUs and Utahs of the world begin to recruit a very different kind of person and begin to really go out of their way to offer value independent of just money. And a lot of programs like to talk about, hey, we want to be transformational. We don't want to be transactional. And I believe in their heart they mean that, but it's hard to get a 20-year-old to buy into it when you don't a 20-year-old. Like if we go back in time and talk to our 20-year-old selves and look at various schools, I mean, like, hey, if you go to this school, look how much money their 40-year-old alumni make, and look how this is connected to U.S. World and News Report, and look at all these things that will pay off in your 30s. We wouldn't care. We would care about the amount of money that's available right now, playing time, maybe availability of cute girls, and maybe proximity to mom and dad, right? I know that schools try to do this. I know that both BYU and Utah don't recruit every single five-star guy because you need somebody who's going to be comfortable in Utah. Somebody who's going to be successful in this kind of environment, probably not somebody who wants to be on every single commercial. But I think it will be very difficult in the foreseeable future to keep 85% of the kids that you sign as high schoolers, or 80% of them on your team moving forward. It's difficult to look somebody in the eye and say, no, you shouldn't go accept that $800,000 check at Arkansas. That's hard.
Yeah, for sure. And, one more thing here, then I do have a BYU question, because we were talking about this earlier in the show. Like, the dynamic of NIL, I don't think is a bad I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think, in theory, I think it's a positive thing. NIL itself, to me, isn't the problem, right? It's the way it's administered. It's the lack of guidelines and guardrails. So, ultimately, to your point, I would never have the nerve to tell anybody to turn down a bag. Like, we're all trying to make our way through the world. And if you could parlay your newsletter into 10 times what you're making right now, then go do it, whatever that looks like. If I had a different offer to do the show in a different market for 5 times my salary, I want to go be able to do that. So I don't necessarily begrudge any young athlete for going to get their money at all. But is there any sort of way that we haven't necessarily discussed to make sure that those decisions, and I know they've tried to close the portal here and the calendar is not as wide open as it used to be. But outside of signing a contract, I just don't see any other way of keeping these kids on campus if they can. I mean, we've had a couple of transfer portal losses for the Utes just over the past couple of weeks. Zach Williams going to USC, and there's all this debate online about, there's the incestuous nature between the Utah and BYU coaching staff, right? And so, are you poaching?
I've seen this on Twitter.
Right.
Of people,
they're poaching our player, and I'm like, you can't call it poaching because it's allowed. It's not against the rules. Like, nobody is doing anything nefarious here. So, is there a way because again, to your point, go get your bag. I'm not saying don't, but is there a way to at least keep these kids on campus for a couple of years? That's a good situation for them and the institution.
So I think there's a couple of things, if I could wave a magic wand, right? Because we do have contracts, right? Like, I in addition to running a newsletter, I have a software product that collects coach and administrator and vendor contracts, and I sell that to newsrooms and agencies and other people. And there are contracts between schools and athletes that are in there. And we're seeing this right now with Arkansas, about Arkansas's ability to recoup some of that buyout money from Nico's little brother. And there's a good legal case to be had that those clauses are not enforceable. So then even a contract doesn't necessarily help. Like, it kind of depends on what some judges and lawyers end up saying. One policy that does not get discussed very much federally that I think would meaningfully help, and this is something that I think lawmakers could do even in Utah, is to have actual aggressive and meaningful agent licensing metrics. And a law enforcement body or some kind of enforcement body, maybe it's the Utah State Bar, maybe it's the FTC, maybe, I don't know, and anybody short of the highway police, that basically requires you, if you're going to represent an athlete in these kind of deals, to pass some kind of baseline competence and ethics exam, just like we do for lawyers. If I want to practice law in the state of Utah, I have to be barred in the state. I'm on a registry, and if I act unethically, I can lose my license and not continue to practice law. And for professional athletes in the NBA and the NFL and NHL, their agencies have created these kind of benchmarks. To the extent that state laws or federal laws exist governing sports agents, they're almost uniformly not enforced. And I think a lot of the problems legitimately in college athletics roster management come from unqualified, unscrupulous, and agents with poor ethics. And if there were meaningful professional consequences to guys that are trying to push people into the portal who aren't in there right now so they could collect 20%, I think that's going to drop some of this stuff down, because it's not the people at CAA and Rock Nation and Wasserman that are escalating what we're seeing so much, particularly in college basketball.
All right, before I say you lose, it continues to be, I think it's a fascinating story. For years and years and years, as soon as the ability to pay players became a reality and we kind of understood what NIL was, I did a show the next day. I said, this is great news for BYU. It really is. If they want to get in the game, if they want to get involved, if they want to start really opening up their checkbooks, and I've got to be careful here because people get mad. I'm not saying the church. I'm saying a lot of the alums that have gone on to start MLMs, whether they're legal or not, they make a lot of money. And, these CEOs of companies, Silicon Slopes and such. And the number I've been told, Matt, is BYU currently has 9 7-figure donors. And the irony is a lot of the money spent, a lot of the resources spent is being spent on the basketball program. And I wonder how this lands with Kalani. But since you and I last spoke, the reports are AJ DeBance is being paid $7 million for 5 months of basketball. You referenced that we do have contracts. Well, according to Jeff Goodman, Robert Wright, the Baylor freshman, signed a contract with Baylor for $1 million. BYU offered $3 million, and he said, okay, I'm gone. Richie Saunders is coming back, reported 7-figure deal for Richie. When you do the math based off the reporting, BYU basketball has a roster that's going to cost whoever's writing checks for the Royal Blue Collective about $13 to $15 million. I wonder what you make of, Travis Hansen, who played at BYU, and others. Here's what Travis had to say. He said, quote, there's this narrative that we outbid people. We don't. We outlove them. We outdevelop them, and we outpurpose them. And it just makes me want to throw up in my mouth, because don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. I just wonder why they can't. Because, look, I don't think you should run from it. Like, you should be doing victory laps, that you have enough donors and you have enough economic power to attract players and give Kevin Young a roster that most people believe is a top 5 roster in college basketball next year. Why don't they just say the thing that's actually happening?
Boy, that is a really good question, and I would love to have that conversation, even if it has to be off the record, with some folks that have BYU.edu email addresses. And I say this not to point a finger at BYU. I think some of that approach is almost universal everywhere in college athletics. I remember when I was at the national championship game in football, and Ohio State won, and the confetti had fallen. And I'm standing next to Ross Bjork, who's Ohio State's athletic director. And I wrote a story about this. One of the first things he told me was we did not have the highest payroll in college football, which I actually believe. And as I would talk to agents on the football side, they would say, like, Ohio State was very competitive, but they're usually not the highest bidder. And I don't know anybody that says, hell yeah, we're the highest bidder. Absolutely, we're going to go drop the most money, other than Texas A&M. And we kind of know how that happened. I think personally, part of the issue, and what I'm about to say here is not me being critical. This is just what I have perceived and seen through having lived most of my life as a Latter-day Saint. The BYU and the church, as an extension of that, do not really drop the bag on anybody. If you're going to be a professor at BYU, or a software developer or somebody else, you're usually not paid top of market. And part of that is because, like, well, don't you want to come work here and be in Provo and be in the heart of everything? And for some people, they absolutely do. And that drops, that drops the labor price down a little bit. We all know that the folks that are doing a ton of work at the ecclesiastical level are unpaid. Like there is a huge culture of, I'm not doing this for the money, I think, anywhere at a church-affiliated institution. And I am not criticizing that. In many ways, I think that's very noble. But if that is true, and you're anybody working within an LDS enterprise, and then you look out and then you see a donor, not an LDS employee, but, a donor suddenly paying top dollar for basketball, that's kind of what's going out there in the marketplace. I can see how that might rub you the wrong way. Again, like not a criticism, but I feel like I get mixed messages from listening to people at CES or who are really close to the program about, like, we don't want to be the high bidder, we want to be a value-centered program, we want to do X, Y, or Z, versus the numbers that get reported by secular basketball media. And I don't know if there is a way you can square the circle with, we want to do things the BYU way, however you define that, and what's happening now. I don't blame anybody for going, I don't know if this makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting time out this way, and that's a good team. Kevin's done a good job, and I'm, like I said, for sure, and I have no issues with you doing what you have to do within the landscape of what's allowed to acquire talent. Just don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. It's very flood the zone, muddy the waters, Steve Bannon like. But anyway, I've kept you too long, Matt. Where can people go get the work?
You bet. You can find my work, which covers off-the-field stories in the college athletics industry, at extrapointsmb.com. Working on some other original reporting and some stuff related to video games, which I know is what most consumers would rather hear me talk about than antitrust law. So you can find all of that at extrapointsmb.com.
Enjoy that Chicago sunshine, man. Thanks for the time, okay?
No. Okay. Yep. Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right, Matt Brown stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Stores. As the weather gets warmer, you might want to start looking and thinking about your lawn care. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step on the court. That's the ultimate power move. IFA Step 1 Crabgrass Preventer and Lawn Food is the first choice to give your yard the healthy green look you admire. The neighbors will be green with envy. You can shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their neighborhood stores today. All right, some NBA drafts, some lottery, some prospects, some playoffs with Richard Smith live in studio coming up next. Get back to some NFL draft takeaways. Good stuff with Matt Brown today. Always a challenging interview for a guy that is that bright and talks that fast. So many interesting storylines around the world of college athletics right now. Matt does a great job writing Extra Points, a newsletter that is a daily stop for me. But live in studio, our guy who's getting ready to take a trip that is making me very, very jealous. He's heading down south to spend some time with our friends at Black Desert. Richard Smitty Smith. Smitty, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Spence, we're doing great. I'm excited to be going down to Ivins or St. George and see the Black Desert. And first time ever I'll be at an LPGA tournament. So to see the best women golfers in the world teed up in person and see how precise they are. You know, when I watch them on TV, they're always in control. They got everything lined up. Their hands are showing. They're just so good at that, and so excited to see that in person and see what it looks like.
Good field too, right? I was reading that they have like 7 of the top 10 golfers on the LPGA tour.
Yeah. I think the tournament, if I understand it correctly, and I don't know this for sure, but my understanding is that they've arranged with whoever they could get from the first major of the year last week in Texas to come up to this tournament, and are flying them all up in private jets and said, hey, you come to the tournament, we got you covered. Don't worry about it. We'll get you from A to B and make sure you're all situated at the resort. And for professional golfers at any level, anything you can do to entice them, to be part of your thing is a big deal. And so that's exciting for the organizers.
We had Patrick Mannion on last week, and I kindly offered to allow him.
Plane?
I kindly offered him to allow me to be picked up by a private jet to go play at Black Desert, and he politely declined.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I was surprised.
Well, he probably declined because he thought, well, Spence is just pulling my leg. He's got his own private plane. He's just trying to save
I can't even get a tee time, let alone a private plane at this point, Smitty. But I'm jealous, man. You'll have a good time. All right, I want to start with a non-NBA story. Shedeur Sanders slides to the 5th round of the NFL draft. And you're a guy that for 40 years, throughout the course of your time with the Jazz, you were in a lot of war rooms. You worked with Frank and Scott, and then Kevin O'Connor and Dennis Lindsey. What is the process like? Because clearly, and look, who knows? We were talking about this during the break. The NFL draft media coverage is full of grifters. It's full of people that claim to know what they're talking about, and the same grifters. So on Wednesday, I'm listening to all these draft experts, and it's Shedeur's 3 to the Giants. It's 21 to the Steelers, but he's not falling out of the first round. And if he does, the Browns are right there in the second. Nobody said 5th round. And the same grifters today are saying, well, my intel over the weekend said, well, this is why he slid, this, that, would. I don't know what to believe exactly. But throughout the course of analyzing these young prospects, the interview process, what's your take when you see this precipitous slide for a player that a lot of people thought would go very early on?
Well, that's the thing that's really fascinating to me about the whole Shedeur Sanders thing. And I'm just a casual NFL fan. I follow it, like anybody else sitting up in row 45, on the end zone, at games. But they, all the stuff leading up to it, right, was him going in the top 10. Maybe he gets to the mid-first round or something, but he's one of the top quarterback prospects. And then to fall that far from what everybody was saying, especially your guy Mel Kiper, was one of the loudest voices in the room about it, and that was a very interesting exchange they had toward the end of the game with the panel that he was with, trying to defend himself and all those kinds of things, and that's what happens when you stick your neck out like that, and make predictions that you really don't quite know what's going to happen, but for a guy like Sanders to slide all the way to the fifth round from what he did in college and also what everybody was saying ahead of the draft was going to happen regarding him, it's fascinating to me because that says to me, Spence, having worked in these kind of environments over the years, there's other things behind the scenes that no one's talking about, whether they know them or they're not aware of what they are, and they can't talk about them simply because of lack of information or knowledge. But other things, whether it's, this thing about that he called half the teams ahead of time and said, don't select me. He did the Eli Manning thing that everybody forgets about, way back when Eli Manning and his dad said, hey, we're not going to go to San Diego, so don't, or you got to trade him or something, now how it all fell out, or the John Elway thing and all that kind of stuff way back in the day. That's not unprecedented, that happening. But if you do that, then the front offices you're talking to, the organizations you're talking to, they're sitting in their rooms and they're going, hey, the guy called us and he doesn't want to play here. Do we like him enough that, we don't care about that? Because this is the process and we're responsible for our own organization and to make it better. Or is it a borderline thing where it's just not worth it and we just go to plan B, whatever, and that's why he kept sliding. And then you have the issue with, position in football. Obviously, there's so many different positions. We get to our pick in the third round. Yeah, we like Shedeur Sanders, but we really need a middle linebacker, and the kid from Ohio State's still there. We got to take him. And so if you went over everybody's boards and draft lists, you'd probably see teams that would say, oh, yeah, we like Sanders, but we had 4 other positions that we had to, take care of first before we got to that point. And so there's a lot of those kind of moving parts that are involved, but something as precipitous as supposed to be in the first half of the first round to the 5th round is really saying something about people don't like his act off the court. They don't off the field. They don't like all the social media stuff. They don't like the circus that surrounds him. He's not really that good to have to deal with that stuff. I don't know. It's just there's something in that regard that I think is fascinating, because at some point it'll start leaking out where teams will say, yeah, well, I talked to the other 4 of my colleagues around the league, and we all said, well, I ain't dealing with that thing, because that's not worth it, whatever it is. And so that to me is the fascinating part. Now, the flip of it to me was when they showed him being selected by the Browns, and, you would have thought he just was the first pick of the draft, the way he reacted, right?
Yeah.
The dancing and doing the stuff, and they didn't show any kind of sulking or head down or any of that kind of stuff. So, if that's the real reaction, or if that's just for made for TV, as we say, or what have you, but they were smart in saying, hey, when this happens, dude, whenever it is, you can't be looking like that guy over in the corner who just broke up with his girlfriend. You gotta make it look good. Yeah, I got it. And it seems like he's probably savvy enough to understand that and handle it that way.
You referenced the reports that Shedeur and his reps, whether it was Dion or what have you, contacting certain teams and saying, don't draft him. We're not going to come. He doesn't want to play for you. Over the years that you spent with the Utah Jazz, we were talking off air a little bit. There are a lot of public reports that people know about, the Derek Harpers of the world, the Ronnie Cycles of the world. Your former boss, Dennis Lindsay, went on a podcast last year, and I actually talked to Dennis about this because I heard it. And he said during the height of the Mitchell, Gobert, Conley group, he had an opportunity to make a trade for what he characterized as a star player. And the agent called Dennis and said, don't do it. He's not coming. So, whether it was through the draft or whether it was via free agency or trades, over the years, whether it was Scotty and Frank or Kevin O'Connor or Dennis Lindsay, when you guys received intel that my guy's not coming, doesn't want to play for you, don't draft him, don't trade for him, don't sign him, how'd you handle it?
Well, it's always a difficult thing because, first of all, your responsibility, first and foremost, is to the organization, to your ownership group, and obviously to your fans to do the best you can to put the best product out on the floor. And so you have to balance what you think is going to make sense for your group and, what the attitude, approach, the overall mindset of the individual is, who you're going to try and add to the group. Nobody wants to deal with a malcontent. Nobody wants to deal with somebody who you have to talk them into, playing nice with the other kids in the room. Like it's, nobody wants to have to do that. Sometimes you have to do that. And I always call that the Iverson effect, meaning like how good is the player and how much does he bring to your group to offset what the headaches and all the other issues are, off the basketball court. And so how do those balance each other? And I call it the Iverson effect because Allen Iverson, in his career, was such a good player and so impactful and so dynamic on the floor that the people I know for a fact who had to work with him all during his career said, yeah, it was a lot of heavy lifting and there was a lot of pain on our part, but we just had to figure it out from day to day.
You deal with the headache because he's so good.
Because he's so good.
Yeah.
So how much of that is in the equation? And so, when agents call you and they say, hey, look, my guy doesn't really want to come to Salt Lake, he doesn't want to do this, it's always a long discussion because you're trying to sell yourself, but at the same time, you have to realize, how is this going to impact our overall group? We're trying to add in that regard to the group. We're trying to improve our situation as it currently stands. If we bring in a guy who doesn't want to be here and a guy who says ahead of time, hey, I don't want to come, but if I have to come, I'm not going to be happy about it, then you have to deal with that. So how is that going to impact the rest of the group? So there's a fine balancing line there, Spence, because you have to do your business to what you feel is going to help your group, but at the same time, what the business you do you think then it's going to be some kind of detriment to your group because of the attitude that's coming with it? So it's always a fine balancing act that's never, there's no blueprint for it. Every single one in that regard is its own entity and comes with its own set of challenges.
And it's tough because, look, Ronnie Cycli wasn't Hakeem Olajuwon, but he would have, I don't know what that team would have looked like, but that's exactly what you needed.
Yep.
And the player Dennis was talking about to make the trade to kind of supplement the growth of Rudy and Donovan, he told me off the record, and it would have been a great addition. Yeah. It's what you needed. How do you balance that where it's like, look, I know you don't want to come here, but then on the other side, you're like, but if you do, we got a shot to win the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a conversation with a player, or is it black and white? If they're going to be a malcontent and they're not an Iverson type talent, you say, okay, go kick rocks.
Yeah, well, it's, again, Spence, every single one is handled differently, and you have to take in all facets of what the situation is, all the different areas that you're involved in there in terms of skill, ability, talent, attitude, work ethic, all those kinds of things, and then you have to know what your group is about. So then you have to figure out, well, if we can do something like this, maybe the guys in our group that are here can win that person over, okay? But it's really a sticky situation when it comes up, and it's not always, it's never the most comfortable because you always feel like we're trying to do what's best for our group. This guy we think can help us. This guy says he doesn't want to be here, whatever it is. Now we have to balance that, like, well, do we still want him? Do we still try and make that work? Because that's our job and the responsibility we have to the organization to try and do these things if and when they become available. Or do we just say, oh, it's too much work, forget it, we're going to plan B and we move on, which may not be in the best interest of the organization. So then you feel like, well, I'm not doing the job I'm supposed to do for our group. Mm-hmm. So it's always a balance. It's always juggling and trying to figure out what really makes sense. Is the addition going to be better than the subtraction of not doing it? At the end of the day, that's always the balance and the juggling act you have.
I can remember the year Paul Pierce was coming out of Kansas, and I was doing some work with the Knicks during their draft prep and process, and the Knicks had Paul Pierce as their number one ranked player that year. Famously, he fell to 10 to Boston and had a Hall of Fame career and won a championship with the Celtics. The most famous Jazz draft story of a player who slid that benefited you guys, I think, is Carl, right?
Yeah.
Whenever I look at that 85 draft, that was a stacked draft. Ewing went one, of course, but players like Xavier McDaniel, Chris Mullin, Detlef Schrempf, Charles Oakley, even a player like Wayman Tisdale, John Koncak, that was a good draft. But Carl slides you guys at 13.
Yep.
And I've heard Frank tell the story a million times, which is a great story. And then, of course, I was a kid, but I remember him getting up to the podium and saying, we're drafting a mailman.
Yep.
So I want you to talk us through what that was like to watch Carl slide when you guys had him analyzed as one of the top, I don't know, 2 or 3 players. Any other stories as well come to mind about players that slid to you guys that you benefited?
Yeah, well, Carl, is obviously the biggest one there. He was projected during that draft to go somewhere between 4 and 7, and everybody believed that he would be going no later than 7 to Dallas, because he was from that area and it was going to be a regional type pick, and the people in that area, that part of the country, knew him well from Louisiana Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Dallas took, I think it was Bill Garnett, is that who it was?
Detlef Schrempf.
Was it Detlef Schrempf?
Dallas traded with Cleveland, according to the draft I have up. So Mullen went 7 to Golden State. Detlef Schrempf went 8. Oakley went 9.
Okay, yeah, that was it. And so he started sliding. And part of the slide, as we understood it at that time, and I think is still the case, is that, looking back on it, was just that there were teams that were a little bit scared off because his college coach wasn't his best advocate in that regard. He had some things that he wasn't quite sure about, how Carl worked and what he would bring to a group. And so he didn't do the best selling job for his player in that regard. So that scared off some teams, and he started sliding. And then I know Kenny Green from Wake Forest was taken number 12 by Washington just before the Jazz. And I remember Scott Layden saying to his dad at that moment in time on the draft stage, "Hey, we got to take the kid from Louisiana Tech." And Frank said, "Well, what's the matter with him? I thought he was supposed to go like top 5, 6, and now he's at 13. Something's wrong." And Scott said, "Not that I know of. I haven't heard anything. We don't have any intel in that regard." And Frank was like, "Are you sure that he doesn't have a bum knee, or he didn't have some kind of legal problem we're not aware of, or something? Because something's going on." And Scott said, "No, I don't know if there's anything. We don't have anything." He said, "But he is good enough. He's talented enough that we just have to take him, and then we have to figure it out." And Frank said, "Okay, I hope you're right." And that was the deal. And then we go, and then Frank makes the call, and then I do remember the subsequent press conference talking about it, and someone asked him about, "Do you think he's going to come in and help you with your scoring?" And Frank said, "Well, we don't have a problem scoring. We have Adrian Dantley, and we have John Drew, and we have Darrell Griffith, and we have Ricky Green, who's kind of a scoring point guard, sort of." He said, "And then we have a developing Mark Eaton, and we have a young Thurl Bailey." He goes, "But we're third to the last in the NBA in rebounding. So we hope that this guy from Louisiana Tech, Karl Malone, can come in and help us with our rebounding and some of our defense and stuff. And then if he scores 8 or 10 points a game, that'll be a bonus for us." And 35,000 points later or whatever, So that's and Spence, you have a million stories like that where you can take a guy or work with a guy and think, well, we can put him in this hole, and we think he can do such and such here, and then the guy ends up doing something else that's far beyond that you're going, "Well, I didn't know he could do that," and then you look like the smart guy in the room, as Frank would always readily say when people said, "Well, John Stockton, how'd you know he's going to be one of the best point guards of all time?" And Frank would always say, "Well, first of all, if we knew he was going to be that, we would have tried to trade up and get him in the top 3 or whatever, which we didn't." And, that's just, there's a million of those draft day stories. Probably the biggest one about guys not wanting to come or whatever happened even before that with the Jazz in '83 with Dominique Wilkins. And the Jazz had the 3rd pick, and they took him, and he would have been a main cog in the Jazz group at that time. And he simply said, I'm not moving to Salt Lake City. I don't want to come. So you got to figure something out. And that's when the Jazz said, well, then we will figure out some other thing. And they ended up making the trade that brought them John Drew and Freeman and some other stuff. But that was a big deal because you're talking about a talented guy who went on to obviously an all-star and a Hall of Fame career in Dominique Wilkins. And so those are the things you have to deal with if somebody's going to stand their ground. Now, see, Dominic Wilkins had a little bit of leverage in that regard, because he, even though it's not as prevalent as it is today, he was standing on the idea that, hey, I'm not going to come if you're not going to make a move for me. I'll just go play in Italy, or I'll go play in Spain, and I'll make a living somehow doing that.
He was that adamant that he didn't want to come to Utah.
Well, that was the information we had, but at the same time, but then you took somebody like Shedeur Sanders. We bring it back to there. Shedeur Sanders doesn't have anywhere else to go. He's not going to play football in China or playing football in Europe or whatever. So he wants to be a quarterback at the professional level. He's got one place to do it, and that's the NFL. And so that's what's intriguing to me, if some of the stories are accurate, that they were calling teams saying, don't draft me, because I don't know why you would want to cut out anybody who may help you to get to where you want to be professionally.
Yeah. That 84 draft, Olajuwon 1, of course, Jordan famously 3 after Portland goes Bowie. Barkley at 5, Charles Barkley at 5, Alvin Robertson, Otis Thorpe, Kevin Willis, and John Stockton, Michael Cage, too, the great rebounder. That was a great draft.
Yep.
Before we catch a break, one more draft question, and I don't want to catch you off guard here, but is there a memory of a player that you guys passed on that slid past you and past some other teams that was drafted later on, and you look back and you say, oh, I think Tony Parker, Raul Lopez. I mean, is there a player that comes to mind that you guys wanted, passed on, went on to play really well?
I mean, you bring up a good one with Raul Lopez and Tony Parker. Those are the two guys we were zeroing in on at the time. And Raul had an unfortunate knee injury right after we drafted him, playing in the world, what's now known as the World Cup, World Basketball Championships, and in Indianapolis, and he had never been hurt up until then. In fact, he had been a real durable young player, and was really good. And the question at the time was, we didn't know if Tony Parker was really a true point guard, or if he was more of a combo guard that maybe wouldn't be what you wanted at that time. And of course, we're coming off at the end of one of the greatest point guards of all time with John Stockton, so we're looking for a guy who we think fits that mold of a pass first, pass second guy, and Raul Lopez was all of that. And we had a lot of calls about Raul right after the draft, about teams going, hey, are you going to keep the Lopez kid? Because we're interested if you're going to stash him or do something else or whatever. And so that was one that still hurts today, because I think Raul was all set up to be a really top-level point guard at the NBA level, and would have helped the Jazz a lot in that transition period. But then again, if we have Raul Lopez and he's healthy and he's doing what he did early in his career in Spain and in Europe, then we might not have had a Deron Williams, because we might have said, oh, we got Raul Lopez. We don't need to pick on Deron. So all those things are domino type effects, Spencer, that are sometimes fascinating to look back on and go, oh, what if this happened, then what about that? The old sliding doors theory.
Sure. And it's always so easy, because every NBA front office has a lot of misses. It's always so easy to say, I think it was Alec Burks instead of Kawhi or Clay or something like that. Like, it's easy to do that.
Yeah.
You swing and miss, and then if you're going to be critical of that, you have to say, well, Donovan late lottery, Gobert late first. The crazy thing, Smitty, before we catch a break, is the majority of the best players that you guys drafted, they weren't your highest picks, right? It was the Carl in the late lottery, and John in the later first, and Donovan late lottery, and Gobert, and Kirilenko in the second round, and Millsap, right? Like, a lot of the best players we've had here have been great value picks later on.
Yeah, well, it's all to do with your scouting and the way you evaluate personnel. Andre Kirilenko at 25, but he was also the third. We had 3 first-round picks that year.
AK was a first.
And
late first. Okay.
And we were trying to move. Scott Layden was trying to move, at least one, if not 2 of those picks, and we couldn't move them. Because other teams knew, that they're not going to take 3 first-round guys, which we ended up doing just because, they were offering us pennies on the dollar in trade scenarios. So I said, well, we're not going to do that. We'll just take so it was actually Dave Fredman, on our group who, said, proposed the idea, what if we take the Kirilenko kid, and we just leave him in Russia because he's under contract for another couple of years. And that really, in my opinion, started or was part of that wave of drafting guys who you knew were under contract overseas and just leaving them there for a year or 2 or 3 while their contracts ran out and let them develop over there where you didn't have to pay them and start that clock on a contract. But guys like Paul Millsap, who was drafted 46, Mo Williams was drafted 46, Jeff Hornacek 47, Manu Ginobili 52, all these guys, guys that you can find good players anywhere in the draft. But you just have to do the homework. You have to dig into the soil and really get your hands dirty, and then have the conviction of what you're seeing that you think makes sense for your group. And so sometimes you get guys like that who can play and they're undervalued, and you just have to say, well, we should have taken him with our first round pick instead of our second round pick.
The 99 draft wasn't great. Elton Brand was the number 1 overall pick. Steve Francis at 2 had a good career. Baron Davis at 3. Lamar Odom at 4. Gordy talks about how uniquely talented Lamar was coming out of college. Wally Zerbiak, Rip Hamilton, Sean Marion, Andre Miller, Trajan Langdon, Corey Maggette, Frederick Weiss.
Yep.
New York Knicks fans, Ron Artest. AK at 24 was probably the best value pick of the entire draft, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and even at that time, I think most people would have, most NBA people would have said, well, he's one of the more talented guys in the draft. But again, the teams that are drafting, usually, especially, Spence, when you're drafting early, that usually means it's because you haven't had a good season.
Yeah.
And if you haven't had a good season, you're looking for some kind of immediate help. And Andre was smart because it was actually Andre and his agent both thought, hey, even though he was 19 at the time, he said, no, I want to. And this is very unique and interesting. He had said to his agent said, well, you might not get drafted until later in the first round if you stay in the draft. But if you wait a year or 2 and you develop and play more in Russia, then we might get you higher in the draft. And Andre said to him, well, if I go now and I get drafted by a team later in the first round, that means more than likely I'm being drafted to a better team.
Good team, yeah.
And so I would rather have the opportunity to play with a better team when I go to the NBA, and I'm happy to play out my contract, which is another 2 years in Russia, which is what he did. So the Jazz drafted him, left him in Moscow for 2 more years playing for CSKA. And then when he was 21, he came over and he was ready to go, compete at the NBA level. But a lot of teams aren't going to take Andre, at 8 or 10 or 12 in that scenario, because it's like, well, he's not coming for 2 years.
Right.
Well, we need help now, because if we don't get help now, I'm out of a job next year if we lose again, right?
Draft him for somebody else.
Yeah, that's all the way the thinking goes. So that was kind of a unique situation with Kirilenko and the Jazz.
Okay, we'll catch a break. Coming up next, some rough news. Our local legend Dame Lillard has torn his left Achilles. The Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets play tonight. Jimmy Butler looks like he's going to give it a go. Ton of great playoff storylines we'll get to with Smitty coming up on the other side right here. All right, stay tuned because at the end of this segment, Smitty has a trivia question that he will ask you, and the first correct response is going to play golf at Hobble Creek, one of the best tracks you're going to find anywhere, quite frankly. So stay tuned. Text line is 877-353-0700. It is the Festival of Tees powered by the Utah Golf Association. Each day of spring, we are giving away rounds of golf to the best courses in the state. So listen to Scott, Sean, and then this show for a chance to win each day from ESPN 700 and the Utah Golf Association. Details can be found at ESPN700sports.com. All right, Smitty, some rough news, and you just feel so bad because so much hope when the Milwaukee Bucks traded for Damian Lillard to pair him next to Giannis. And, I was watching it live, and so it was a non-contact injury, as we were discussing off air. And when I saw the look on Dame's face, I said, he knows that he just did something. And I hate to be the sports talk radio guy that pretends he's a doctor, right? So I always wait until the actual diagnosis. MRI this morning, torn left Achilles tendon, and Dame turns 35 this offseason. I hate to say it might be it, but it might be it. So what do you make of the news?
Well, it's such a tough injury for him, and because we all know how hard Damian Lillard works to get himself in the best shape possible and to be the ultimate competitor. He's always been that. That's how he's gotten to this stage of his career, Spence, of being an all-NBA player, all-star, part of the 75th anniversary team. It's all out of his hard work and determination. And then when you watch that sequence and you see how silly it was, the movie made to what happened to him, you just feel for him. The issue going forward, not just for him and his career, but also for the Milwaukee Bucks organization, is if they get knocked out in this first round of the playoffs, they still have Damian Lillard under contract for 2 more years at in the mid 50s,
60 mil next year,
yeah.
60 mil, yeah.
And then you got Giannis as well, who's making similar type money for the next 3 years, and so you're really strapped as an organization without having one of your best players on the court and having to pay that kind of money. But it's not just the money you're paying to him; it's the fact that it keeps you from adding other guys to replace him, and so that really is such a heart-rending thing for him individually and also for their organization, because that's a big pill to swallow right now in terms of what they're trying to get done.
Let me ask you about where we stand with this Lakers-Timberwolves series. I don't know if JJ was trying to send a message to the front office like I have no depth on this team, but I found it to be a very irresponsible coaching move to play all 5 of those guys every minute in the second half. Because what we saw, Smitty, is the Timberwolves are now up 3-1 and on the precipice of eliminating the Lakers. We'll see if they can get back into it. But in the fourth quarter, LeBron didn't score. In the fourth quarter, Luka's legs went. Dorian Finney-Smith had an open dunk, and he short-armed it because he was tired. Now, look, Jared Vanderbilt, who we had here, Gabe Vincent, Jordan Goodwin. It's not a deep team. I'm not saying that it is, but Minnesota's got depth, and I think that depth ultimately proved to be the nail in the coffin, and Ant was great. But what do you make of the way JJ elected to go about that coaching decision to play all of those 5 guys every minute in the second half?
Yeah, you know what that is for me, Spence. That is a rookie coach who hasn't coached before at all, even as an assistant coach, comes in, okay, he played in the league, okay, he's a smart guy, okay, he knows his team. All those things are true. But when you get in the heat of the moment and you're down 2-1, you're on the road, you're competing, you're in the game, you've got a lead, you lose the lead, you come back, grab the lead, back and forth game, one of those pivotal games in a series, that is to me is a rookie move where the guy where he was not comfortable subbing out the guys who were on the floor who were keeping the team in the game for fear that the game is going to quickly slip away in some 10-2 run by the other team. And so I just got to keep my guys out there, and I got to try and use my timeouts where I can to get them blows. But that's that to me is someone who's not used to making those decisions, and they're not really comfortable with the guys they've got, which, by the way, is probably true. He's probably right in the fact that I don't know if I can count on the guys who I would put in to be able to hold us in on the road in such a pivotal game against a tough team that's got all their weapons out there. And so that's a tough deal for him. And look, it came down to a play or two, right? So nobody would be talking about this if LeBron makes a three, if Luka makes some game-saving play at the end, and they go, how great was that? Those guys pulled it out, and now they're back in the series going home and all those kind of things. So that's one of those things you make. You roll with what your gut tells you, and his gut told him, I think we can get to the finish line with our guys playing the way they are, and it just didn't work out. And the other guy, in the horse race, beat you by a nose at the finish line.
Teams that are up 3-1 win 90% of the time in pro basketball. So it's a tough ask. I suppose if there's a team that can do it, it's a team that has LeBron James and Luka Doncic. But 3-1, Minnesota up. You think it's curtains? You think they're cooked?
No, because look, LeBron's been here before. In fact, he's been here, on the in a different circumstance where he was down 3-1 and had to go on the road for Game 5 and won Game 5, went home and won Game 6, came back and won Game 7 on the road, and the famous Kyrie Irving three-pointer at the end of Game 7 to win the championship for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So anytime, and I've always said this, Spence, I'm a big LeBron James fan. You can say whatever you want about how he, manipulates things and how he's got it. He's put himself in a position where if he's healthy, and now if Doncic is healthy, and if they can play the way they played yesterday, and they can get any kind of help, then I don't put it past them to be able to do it, because they're playing Game 5 at home, right? Then they just have to go back and scrap out a Game 6 somehow, and you never know how that's going to go, right? Each game is really its own series. If you look at games, an individual game chopped into quarters or even chopped into segments from timeout to timeout, if you can get in a flow and they get into Game 6 in Minnesota and Anthony Edwards picks up early foul trouble and Rudy Gobert, tweaks his ankle or something, blah, blah, blah. Anything can happen. So any team that has James and Doncic healthy and playing the way they're capable of playing, I don't put anything. I never bet against those guys.
Before we get to tonight, and then I'll set you loose because I know you got to hit the road so you can go down to the golf tournament. And those of us that are humble, working men of the people will continue to grind day to day. But you do your thing. I don't know that I've ever asked you. There was always this narrative. So JJ Redick and most teams that play against a Rudy Gobert-led team like to go small. And they're trying to isolate Luka on Rudy every time they can, and they're trying to make Rudy guard on the perimeter. And we saw that happen here with Quinn and, that Clippers series where Terrence Mann has a career night. Maxi Kleba hits a bunch of threes for Dallas. And there's always been this debate about what's fair to say of, when it comes to the criticisms of Rudy in a playoff series, when a team goes small, does the coach have to sit him? Now, Minnesota has Naz Reid, who's been awesome. And I think at times Quinn just elected to be stubborn and play Rudy no matter what the other team was going to do, because Rudy was so important to what you guys did defensively. What's fair to say in that conversation, the space of this team goes small, what do we do with Gobert?
Yeah, well, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask that question to, because I'm in the Rudy Gobert camp as far as how he affects the game, what he brings to. Yeah, you want to isolate him out on a wing against a guy. He's going to get beat. It doesn't matter who the ball handler is. That's not the way to play it. Taking him out late in games, you take away a lot of stuff that he does, that isn't in the so-called public eye or the glare of the spotlight at that moment. Like when you do a switch and he gets isolated out. Okay, that's not the way to play it. That's not the way to, if you're smart, to do it if you're team. But okay, teams have done it. But he's too valuable a player to me to take off the floor, because he does a lot of other things, not just within the scheme of the thing of what's going on at the moment, but just in terms of his approach and attitude and what he wants to do for the group. Mm-hmm. He's not out there, being Anthony Edwards, trying to say, hey, everybody look at me, watch me, put it between my legs 10 times and spin and do this and make some, wild fall away, jump shot or something, some hero play. He's out there to try and help you as a group to try and have success and win the game in whatever way you can. So, I'm the wrong guy because, those things I think get amplified, especially at playoff time. There's a reason you won 60-plus games during the regular season with him in the starting lineup and him doing stuff. And, okay, you get in a playoff series, there's other adjustments you can make that don't put him in that kind of a space that's not advantageous for him and therefore not advantageous for your group. And that's up to coaches in terms of how they game plan that and how they adjust to that.
All right, final thing. Let's get a thought on tonight. We'll leave Cavs Heat to the side because, it's 3-0. But Golden State, Houston, Jimmy Butler went through shoot-around this morning. He is officially a game-time decision. Steph had a classic Steph game to get them game 3. It's still so fun to watch Steph when he's doing Steph things, even at this age. Houston, a fun story, and I actually thought because of their athleticism, their strength, and their length on the perimeter that Golden State was going to have an issue. Now, they still might. It's only 2-1. But before I set you loose so you can get down to St. George, what are your thoughts on the series? What do you think happens tonight?
Yeah, I think that Golden State will play the same way. I don't know what Butler's situation is health-wise. Obviously, they're better off with him on the floor than without him. If he doesn't play, then that just means Curry has to have another type of game, which he's capable of doing at home, especially, to be able to keep them in the lead in that series. But, Houston's a young, scrappy, tough-nosed, hard-nosed defensive team, and so you're going to see them getting at it because obviously they don't want it. They're going to have the specter of falling behind 3-1 if they can't figure out a way to win the game. So you're going to see them scrapping and clawing, and maybe that means that Steph Curry spends a lot of time on the free throw line, which would be advantageous for Golden State because he's almost automatic there. But I expect it to be a tough game, another tough game, and I expect it to come down the last 2 minutes and who makes a play, who misses a shot, who steps in and takes a charge, whatever it is. Let's just hope we don't have an ending like we had in the Detroit Knicks game yesterday.
Yeah, that was a foul, wasn't it?
It was a foul, but the NBA is wrong in not having an ability to be able to look at something like that at the end of the game. That rule, I'm sure they'll discuss it this summer. There's got to be some way of dealing with a situation like that, especially when in the stakes the way they are right at that moment, and you're saying, well, the whistle wasn't blown, there wasn't a call made, so therefore we have nothing to review and we have nothing to discuss. That just isn't right.
Totally agree.
Something's got to change in that.
But I'm just glad that the Knicks won.
There you go.
I'm glad that it's fun. Yeah.
I know you and your boy Tony Jones. I know you're
and
all.
Porter. Porter's a Knicks fan.
You're all behind. Porter's some kind of Where's Porter from? Oakley. Where's he from?
He was raised in God's country up in Summit County.
Now what's he doing rooting for the Knicks?
Yeah, because the Knicks
come on.
Would you like to stand up for yourself, young man?
Porter.
Yeah, he has. People have fair points when they bring up the randomness of my sports allegiances.
It's not just random. You also made horrible choices. Like you were a free agent, you went Mets, Knicks, and Cowboys.
I know.
But
yeah,
it's a lot of losing lately.
Right. See, he's a bandwagon guy. I could tell.
No, he should be more of a like.
It's just a broken bandwagon.
Mets, Cowboys, Knicks. I mean, that is decades of just suffering.
Yeah, well,
All right, my friend. I know you got to get going. Have a good time down there. Send some pics. Enjoy it. It's going to be fun.
No, it'll be great. We'll have a good time. Yeah, we'll miss you.
Okay, buddy. We'll see you next week.
Babe.
All right, we'll catch a quick break. We'll catch a quick break. More coming up on the other side. Don't go anywhere. The Monday after the NFL draft is completed, I always give Porter the same marching orders. I want a grinder of tape on the show. I want somebody who settles in, he puts in the work, he reviews film, and he comes away with some hot Monday takes. So we're bringing in JP today, John Paul Chunga. The Monday after the NFL draft, is it depression that it's over? Is it gratitude that it happened? How does that land with you?
I'm just glad I was there to watch it all. All of the rounds, sitting down, imagining the fits, imagining the way that these players will be in the schemes. It's revelatory to watch the draft, and I'm glad to be on the program today.
What is your favorite fit of player and scheme?
Oh, I mean, come on. Where can I get started? Jalen Royals with Patrick Mahomes?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fit. That's a good match of player and scheme. Caleb Lohner getting drafted. How about the college basketball guys that end up being NFL stars? You know, people forget Donovan McNabb, former Syracuse walk-on the basketball team. He played pretty well as a quarterback.
He did. That's good knowledge. How much NBA draft tape are you currently grinding right now?
So I had to take off, obviously, the last 4 days because NFL draft consumed me.
Mm-hmm.
That much is clear, but plenty. I absolutely love this time of year when it comes to the NBA draft. You're just watching all these players. You know, you do the same thing. Is the other thing. You've been watching college basketball in the entire year and looking and projecting how these guys will fit on NBA teams.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's why we're kindred spirits, knower of ball, knowers of hoop, and grinders of tape. Jazz postseason media availability. Of course, I was there on time and stayed late because that's how it is when you grind day to day. One thing really stood out. A couple things stood out. But when Will Hardy was asked about Isaiah Collier, Keontae George, and Bryce Sensabaugh, he said some various things about all of them, but the one common thread was their conditioning, John Paul. That stood out to me, and it wasn't anything I was expecting. So what did that say to you about what this very important offseason, as my good friend Jay-Z pointed out during his postseason media availability, how important is this offseason for these youngsters for the Jazz?
What's big, I think you look at Taylor Hendricks, who is hopefully going to have a good year up until, game 3 of the regular season, how much he transformed his body, how he really went into the summer and accepted challenges. You could even look at Walker Kessler and the big year that he had in year 3 in playing in summer league and taking feedback from Will and the entire coaching staff and realizing he has to get to a level where the peaking is coming around now because this is when the playoffs happens. This is when in a second half you might play the entire final 24 minutes of a game and not get subbed out. You have to be in the best condition of your life. And for those players who are first-year guys who probably hit the rookie wall in January and still realized, there's a couple more months left. And I even think about how Cody Williams was playing 2 schedules in the G League form as well. Like, he had to adjust to being available not only for the NBA team, but for the G League squad. And there's no reason that these guys next year should be surprised by the rigors of an NBA schedule because of how long 82 games is. And if you're going to be on one of those good teams with those apex predators, with the top players in the entire league, you're going to be playing even more than 82 games. And hopefully for many of these players, you're on national teams like Lauri Markkanen is with Eurobasket. So you're adding even more wear and tear on the body. So as they focus and look forward to their future NBA careers, they've got to definitely be cognizant of realizing that they've got to be in the absolute best shape of their life.
Tell me what, the complicated part when it comes to analyzing a team that isn't winning at a high level and is developing young players and is giving high usage to young players is figuring out what is real about some of the good numbers that the young players put up. And will these players be able to put up similar numbers for a team that is trying to win? You know, Kyle Filipowski down the stretch, I mean, that game against Portland, he had like 30, 18, and 5. I mean, some of these guys put up some pretty audacious stat lines, but in losing endeavors for a team that wasn't winning at a high level. And you can talk about whichever young player. You can go Keontae, you can go Bryce, you can go Walker, you can go Filipowski. I call him Flip. It's not a big deal. You can go Isaiah. Like, of the young players that had games where you look at the box score and you go, wow, he did what? What sort of skill set or production do you believe can be translatable when the team is winning again at a high level?
I look at Zay because, as you know, I call Isaiah Collier Zay.
I like it.
And I think about the passing that can definitely translate to when this team is ready to contend and ready to win at a serious clip. But being able to run an offense, knowing exactly where everybody on the floor needs to be, and as the point guard, as the lead guard, as whatever kind of guard you want to call him, he has to make sure that he has all the chess pieces in the right place. Defensively, I look at Walker Kessler. I was courtside in Memphis, and these seats are right next to the court. You can hear exactly what everybody is talking about. And when Ja doesn't have a defense figured out, I'm able to hear Walker Kessler calling out every single Memphis set. His communication, his style of knowing where everything goes defensively is something that you want to see Isaiah translate offensively. And for him, I mean, it's clear that they're pretty invested in making him the best he can become at that position, because when you're tasked as leading a club in a league with so many elite guards, you're going to go through so many growing pains. And that's kind of the determining factor on whether you're going to win in the league. Remember, a couple years ago, they had Mike Conley, and they go off to this 10-2 start. There's a difference between veteran leadership at the guard position and young guys trying to figure it out. And Isaiah Collier certainly has a long way to go, but learning from a Walker Kessler what he communicates defensively, that needs to translate for Isaiah Collier offensively for them.
Got to ask you about Cody, who is still very young. And, you know, we had Smitty in studio. It's a really interesting dynamic with Jazz basketball, historically speaking, where the majority of the better players we've had here, I say we, it's not a big deal, we're a family on three, have either been mid-first-round picks, late first-round picks, some in the second round. And a lot of the early picks that the Jazz have made, some hit, some didn't. That's part of analyzing NBA basketball. But I think it's fair to say that if you're going to be a top 10 pick, you just want to show more than what he showed. And I'm not ready to anoint or dismiss, nor should anybody else be. But what's the hope over there in the organization of what this offseason brings for Cody?
It is that transformation of the body. Everybody knew that he had to transform his body from just being a 19-year-old in the NBA. He was always going to be a long-term investment, because at his position where he's drafted, you can look at the projection of starter, NBA skill, what they are at each pick slot. That's why they wanted to put themselves in every position to get into the high draft. But Cody Williams is so early on in his development journey. I had to look this up earlier on this year about how many minutes that he played in college, and it was around the 600 range, and in the NBA he got 1,000 minutes. So we're talking about somebody who at high level basketball has played 1,600 minutes. I don't know if you can make broad brushes and future tales on his future career early on in the development part, because you even look at the fact that he comes from NBA stock with his brother, and Jalen came out very much seasoned at the college level, having gone to Santa Clara for a couple years. So very different spots for them, but knowing that he has an NBA player on a pretty good team, he knows exactly what it takes to get to the level where he needs to be to start contributing to an NBA roster. But it's definitely early, and he has a huge way to go before he's probably satisfied with the way his NBA career is going.
Tell me what you're hearing about Taylor. You brought up Taylor earlier, and as you know, bullish over here. Remain hasn't changed. His health, his conditioning, his mentals. I mean, I can't imagine what. That's a lonely thing, man. I'm not the radio host that is analogous with injuries that regular Joes have and players, but I've had a broken leg. As you know, I had knee surgery last year. It's a lonely thing when you're recovering and you're not mobile and you've got to deal with what it's like being isolated. But what's the buzz around the organization with Taylor? How's he doing, and what do we expect in the summer?
Yeah, it was good for Taylor to be around the team for as much as he could be because it can be very lonely. But he was still in the facility, being around the guys, showing up to every single practice, watching the games, making sure that he was being available there. But even going on the road and seeing what it takes alongside the season, because it's still early on in his NBA future. He was only a couple years removed from being at UCF, where I don't know if that's necessarily an NBA factory, but he had to have really widened his eyes once he got to the NBA and he's playing against Kevin Durant in his very first game. The good thing was that he was able to make those road trips. He's getting up shots now. Now it's adding those big movements and making sure that he's going to be able to get to contact. The idea is still for him to be available after Summer League. But as far as the connectivity of staying with the team and still feeling like he's a part of it, I think that the staff and he himself, he's done a really good job at being very open. And heck, you even saw him in that dumb hat that he was wearing on the bench towards the end of the season.
Wow.
That was a dumb hat. I think we can all agree. He looked like Bobby Bacala.
Nice. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's very rare to hear you knock on somebody for taking a fashion risk because you were very fashion conscious, JP. Let's be clear.
I am very
I know.
fashion conscious, but he didn't even get the reference when I said Bobby Bacala. Like, he's not watching The Sopranos. He's just wearing a hat because he thought it was something that was cool to wear.
Oh, I'm stunned that he didn't get your Bobby reference. That's shocking.
Kids don't appreciate The Sopranos.
No, they don't, and they should. Rewatch it if you've already watched it. If you haven't watched it, you should run to watch it as soon as you can. So you brought up the 10-2 start with Team 49. That's what I called them, but whatever, a little inside. And I want to get into a conversation with marketing for a second because that team, you referenced Mike Conley. They also had Chris Dunn, who's starting for the Clippers in the playoffs. They had Kelly Olynyk. I call him the Clinic. No big deal. There were veteran pieces. I mean, your guy THT, there were veteran pieces on that team that knew how to play basketball. And I always bring it up because marketing that year, obviously all-star here in Utah. He was 25.6 points. He was basically 9 boards. He was close to 50, 40, 90. And I don't know really what's fair to say about anything critical of Lowry, even though the numbers have dropped since then, because he is a veteran playing with children. And I think it was the Laker game when the Jazz beat the Lakers here in Salt Lake, and Lowry had 32. He was 6 of 10 from 3, and it was like, oh, yes, that's right. He is still awesome. On the scale of marketing Team 49 All-Star and marketing playing with kids, numbers completely fallen over the past couple of years. Where do you land on who he is?
Yeah, I think there's definite nuance in Lowry's game because he's so dependent on what's going around him, the surroundings within an offense. And you saw it earlier on in his career when he was in Cleveland and Chicago, but really blossoming once he came on that Team 49 with Mike Conley. He needs competence at the guard position to get him the ball. He needs the ability to have spacing on the floor. And for a team that really didn't have necessary shooters alongside Lowry, it was very difficult for him to be the number one guy on a scouting report. It's very different from being concerned about Mike Conley shooting, Malik Beasley shooting, Jared Vanderbilt even could stretch on that Team 49 squad, than looking at a team that has Walker Kessler taking threes at the end of the season that's not necessarily the same spacing that Larry Markkinen is going to be getting. So he lands somewhere in the middle, but that's still a really elite player. And those flashes that you saw in that Laker game are exactly what you want to see on a day in, day out basis once this team is more built out and has better complements around him.
May 12th, NBA draft lottery. What's the John Paul routine? What sort of lucky charms will we be exercising that day, as we're all hoping that the number one pick is the reward for this painful couple of years?
It's a big day.
It is a big day. It is.
It's a big day in the franchise. And I looked this up. Of all the teams in the lottery, do you want to guess how many teams have not had the number one pick?
I hope it's more than one. Is it more than one? Because one is certainly the Utah Jazz.
It is only one.
Wow. Wild.
Only one team in the lottery this year has never had the number one overall pick. That's the Utah Jazz. And I even went further. I was like, what about top fives? How many of these teams have had top fives? Only one team in the lottery has had fewer top fives than Jazz. In the history of the Utah Jazz, they've only had it 5 times. New Orleans has had it 3 times, but they've gotten 2 number one overall picks. So when I look at just who should morally get the number one overall pick, I am confident in saying that it's the Utah Jazz. So I don't have to do anything. I don't have to find the 4-leaf clover. I don't have to get the lucky horseshoe. I don't have to go swing a couple golf balls at the range at Eaglewood. I will be fine just knowing wherever it lands is where it will land, and it's fine. You know, the Lakers, they got that pick for Magic Johnson on a coin flip because they had that pick from the New Orleans Jazz because they signed Gail Goodrich. Luck happens in a weird way, and it would be very weird for the Utah Jazz to jump in the lottery, but hey, weirder things have happened in this league. Just look at the playoffs.
How is that golf game, young man? How we doing? We improving still?
I played a couple weeks ago, and I did all right, but it was only 9 holes. I think that's the only capacity that I have for golf right now.
That makes me so sad. I cannot express how sad that is. I was with our guy Trevor over the weekend, and we were bemoaning the fact that we can't get you out anymore. But here's where I want to go next. You had a front row seat to watching the new Utah men's basketball coach develop some young bigs, namely Rudy Gobert in 1 year with Walker Kessler. The Mavs lose to the Grizz in the play-in, so Alex Jensen has now allocated his full time and energy to his new job. What would you say to Ute fans about your experience watching him coach when he was with the Jazz before he went down to Dallas?
Yeah, Alex is tremendous as a coach, tactician, and being able to bring all the experience that he has, not only from his playing days, but to what he had in the NBA. I think it was good for him to see an organization beyond Utah. Talk to Will about how advantageous that was just to leave San Antonio and go to Boston, to see how somebody else does it, to see how an organization outside of your comfort zone is able to operate. And I'm sure the same thing applies for Alex in going to Dallas and learning how Jason Kidd runs a program. But his expertise in cutting through things and telling a George Niang, if you shoot 40% from this spot and you defend capably, you're going to be a tens of millionaire in this league. And boiling it down to just that, be a capable defender, shoot the 3 at 40%, you'll be fine. And George does that and still is in the NBA and has one of the best winning records of any player out there. Like, I think it's him and Royce O'Neal because of the fact that they're on good teams. Not so much for Royce this year, but still, you get the point. Well, Alex being able to get it to that specific point helps players along, and I think that'll help in the future for the Utah men's basketball program when you're thinking about, do we want to produce pros? Are we going to get these guys in there? They got to commit things on the NIL front, but you've got a good one in Alex Jensen.
All right. I hope that you are standing on your feet and you're shouting it out, Real. We'll end with a little.
I already told you I gave up. I'm done.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. We have listeners, namely one little birdie source of mine, that will have his heart broken if you continue just to stay out. You've been an RSL fan since day one. Meet the team day, pictures with our guy Jason Kreis. So I understand the sentiment, but we got Big Willie goals coming in. We got Johnny Russell coming in. We've got a 3-1 victory over San Diego. So the vibes are high, John Paul. Are you inching closer and closer to getting back in with our local soccer club?
So, all right, I am out, but admittedly, the Johnny Russell signing got me a little moved because my fiance's father is from Scotland. So he'll be able to rally behind Johnny Russell. And the beard is spectacular, so I'm in on that aspect. But I didn't see him play. And I want to hear from you because I asked ahead of the game over the weekend at San Diego. You were boots on the ground.
I was.
You know, gumshoe reporting. How much longer am I going to have to wait for Johnny Russell to get his debut in the Claret and Cobalt?
He should be available coming up.
And sometimes the Grid City.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, well said. He should be available coming up this weekend. He hasn't been with a club in almost 7 months. He needs to get in shape. But Big Willie Goals, my guy, was on the ground, and we saw him for a little bit. So, but we should see Johnny as early as this weekend.
How many goals has Willie scored
this year?
Yeah,
I believe that number is close to 0, if it's not 0.
So how is he Willie goals?
He scored 10 last year.
But this year it's Willie no goals.
Well, I'm trying to look at this optimistically. Remember, we were all encouraged to call Johnny Menendez Johnny Goals 2 when he only scored 1, so he became Johnny 1 goal. But I'm just trying to look at this through rose-colored glasses because, as you know, I'm both an empath and an optimist.
Okay, I get that. I understand. The name's on the beam. There's a connection there that will never be broken, but I still need to be won over, and it needs to start by seeing Johnny Russell on the field for RSL. I also love how delicious it is that he was on SKC, which clear RSL rival.
So the one way that we can get you back is Johnny Russell healthy, fit, in the lineup and performs, and then maybe we can get John Paul back? Yeah,
and then maybe he makes an appearance on Foothill, at the former McCool's.
Okay.
I'll be in.
I like it. All right, before I set you loose, I know you got 3 jobs, so what's got most of your energy right now?
That's true. I do have 3 jobs. Right now, listen to Roundball Roundup, Utah Jazz Podcast Network. I spoke to Kyle Mann about the top guys at the draft, not to get anybody anticipating one lean either way, but info on Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, Con Knipple, all those guys at the top of the draft. Just search the Utah Jazz Podcast Network in your podcast feed. And then, of course, the NWSL. Got a game this Saturday. Utah Royals against the North Carolina Courage. Ali Sentnor, the best number 9 in the entire state, taking on NC and Jaden Shaw, who's also a really bright young player for the U.S. Women's National Team. Plenty to look forward to on the Utah Royals front as they are only 6 games in with 20 more to go.
Thank you, young man. I want you to give Corey just a big hug and tell her it's from me, okay?
Will do. Get Johnny Russell on the field.
We will. We will. That's the deal. All right, JP, John Paul, check out the Roundball Roundup podcast. He's also the voice of the Stars and the Utah Royals. And, of course, probably the pinnacle and peak of his career in life is the producer of this radio show a number of years ago. JP stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Advanced Window Products, where you can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Local Salt Lake company operated by Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, an NFL football player. So definitely give him a call. If you're looking for windows right now, call today because you get that $2,500 off. But if you anticipate needing new windows, like, for instance, before it gets really warm, because if you have old windows, here's a little 2 + 2 = 4. Your home will be very hot, and you have to jack up the AC, and then you're going to spend a lot of money. But if you're anticipating needing windows, call today, too, because you lock in that $2,500 savings just by getting on the schedule. Our good friends at Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or visit advancedwindows.com. All right, we're back to some NFL draft takeaways in the 5 o'clock hour, and then, of course, we'll get you ready for some NBA playoffs. But RSO, with the result over the weekend, Sam Junka is going to join us coming up next, right here on ESPN 700. All right, during the 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight, we will get you up to date on all the NFL draft storylines involving the local players. Only Caleb Lunner drafted for the Utes. BYU did not have anybody drafted, but over the past hour, we've had some news coming in about players signing some undrafted deals and some minicamp invites. Then, of course, it's a big night in pro basketball. We'll get you ready for some NBA playoffs as well. But RSL went to San Diego over the weekend and got a result, 3-1 over the expansion side, who came here earlier this year and actually beat Real Salt Lake. Our next guest scored a wonder goal, a great strike. Sam Junka joins the show on a Monday afternoon. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate the time. So we got to talk about the goal. Did you know that so I always find it fascinating to talk to soccer players that scored goals the way that you did over the weekend. When you struck it, did you know that you had put it on frame? Did you feel that good about it right instantly after you struck the ball?
I felt like I got good contact on it. The difficulty with shots like that is there's a lot of people in and around the box, and a lot of times it'll get blocked when it's on frame. This time it didn't happen, and so fortunately, I went into the side netting.
How much of a relief was that result? I mean, we'll get to some of the other storylines, but the start has been rough. It's been up and down. So how good did that feel, Sam, to go to San Diego and get that 3 points?
It felt really good. We've been in need of a win, and it's never easy to win away, and to be the first team to win in San Diego was special.
So tell us about yourself a little bit. It's the first time we've been able to have you on the show. You're one of the new players. You were acquired from Dallas in the Anderson Julio deal. Tell us about yourself. Growing up, when did you first start playing soccer, and how do you feel about landing here with RSL?
Yeah, I started playing maybe around 6 years old, just recreationally, and got more serious as time went on. Really excited to be here in Salt Lake. And I feel like me and my fiance are settling in here and calling it home now.
So instantly, of course, it was probably a little bit jarring. It's kind of the interesting thing when you're a pro athlete, you don't really have control over where you live. Did you know much about our market, or is most of the dynamics about Utah pretty new to you and your fiance?
Most of it's pretty new. I had a little bit of an idea of what it might be like, because I actually thought when I was leaving Houston that I might end up in RSL, but I ended up in Dallas, and that was that. And now 2 years later, the opportunity came up again, and it happened this time. And so we've gotten more familiar with the Valley and all that Utah has to offer this time around.
You are competing with Alex for that spot. What's it been like to and look, when it comes to healthy competition, of course, that's something Pablo wants, and the season is so long. You want multiple options at each position. But tell me about that kind of positional battle that you and Alex are kind of fighting for.
I think it's been good. I feel like the left back position has been a strong one for us this season, and the competition is good. Alex is a great player, and I think that we've both pushed each other to be at our best, and I think that's helping the team this season.
Tell me what specifically Pablo has asked from you when it comes to that positional battle and the other things you're expected to do for the club.
So specifically for that position, they want us to not just be defenders, but to provide some help in the attack and to get forward. And it's a physically demanding position. They want us to provide a pretty high output, usually the highest of the team in terms of distance covered and running back and forth. And, it's a position where we do a little bit of everything, and, we play on both sides of the ball.
So far through the season, throughout the start of the season, it has been a little bit up and down. Tell me what you feel like you guys excel at. When you're getting points, what are you doing well?
I think that we're a team that brings energy and grit, and I think we showed that in this past game, because the first half wasn't easy. They had a lot of the ball, and we were kind of weathering the storm for a lot of the first half, but we were the team that struck first, and then we carried that into the second half, where we kind of grew into the game and put the game away.
We saw another brace from Diego Luna, Sam, and that young man's star continues to shine and continues to rise. What's it like training with him? What's it been like to be his teammate? And tell us maybe your thoughts on how he continues to evolve and really rise up the ranks as a genuine, legit superstar in Major League Soccer.
It's been great. You know, you always want to play with great players on your team, and he's been somebody that's been doing a great job for us this season. Funny story is he actually played with my little brother growing up when they were both playing for the San Jose Earthquakes. And so I knew about him a little bit. It's kind of funny to be playing with, people that my little brother has played with or against now in the league. But yeah, he's been somebody that I think has shown that he can produce at the club level and now on the national team level. So it's really exciting to see kind of where his career takes him.
Just one brother? What's the family dynamic like? You grew up where? You're a Southern California kid, right? So is your family still there? And is it just you and your one brother?
No, I'm the middle of three boys. So I've got my little brother, the one that has played with Diego, and I've got an older brother. Nobody actually lives in California anymore. My parents and my little brother, they currently reside in nearby Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, up north.
Sure.
And my big brother is actually going to be returning to California to be nearby UC Davis, but currently he's in Beaverton, Oregon.
Very nice. Who put a soccer ball at your feet first? Was it dad? Was it mom? Was it your brothers? How'd you get involved in the game?
I have to think that I saw my big brother playing. He played all sorts of sports, soccer being one of them, and I saw him playing, and so I got involved when I saw that.
Did you play any other sports? I mean, you're legitimately 6 feet tall. Some of these soccer guys are like 5'5", and they only play soccer. Did you play any other sports?
Played a little bit of basketball. I did a little bit of swimming growing up, but otherwise it was intramural, baseball, football, those kinds of things, but primarily soccer, basketball.
Did you have a soccer hero growing up that you wanted to be, and a favorite club that you like to watch?
Growing up, I think the one that inspired me the most was probably Ronaldinho. The things that he did on the field and with the ball were just, they looked magical, and I always liked to watch his YouTube videos and try to recreate them, and I think that's what really inspired me.
When did you know that you were really good at this? When did you know that if you put in the work and had some health luck and did the right things that you could potentially be a professional player?
I would say sometime when I was a teenager, I started to, believe that I had, the ability and the opportunity to maybe make it. But, it's always hard to say because there are players that you grow up with that you think are going to make it for sure, and they don't, right? And so I think what I started to realize was that it wasn't just about the talent, and that there were other factors and other, non-controllables, controllables show a lot of grit, a lot of fight, and not just a strong tactical sense. So I think that there's a good balance there. I like that he's a good man manager. He, is a player's coach who knows what it's like to be in our shoes. And so I think all that experience allows him to be the coach that he is.
So tell me your thoughts on where you guys find yourselves and the kind of the conversations in that locker room. With the win against San Diego, you're now 4-6-0. I think you're the only team in all of Major League Soccer that has not tied a game. And so, Sam, you know the deal. You're a vet. I think you played in 144 games. And ultimately, some of the best teams we've ever had here have been off to really bad starts, and some of the worst teams got off to great starts. Like, it is such a marathon-long season. But through 10 games, where do you guys feel like you're at right now? What do you have to do to maybe get more results coming your way?
Yeah, I think that, we feel a sense of urgency knowing that we're, getting close to being a third of the way through the season. At the same time, we know that it's a long season, and, you win a couple games in a row and suddenly you shoot up towards the top of the table. And so I think, in the past couple of games, we've gotten back to playing a little bit more the way we want to and playing more complete games. And I think, the things that we've been doing in training and going into these games, we have to keep doing that and just continue to be better in our defensive end and in our offensive end in the boxes. And that's the focus that we've been talking about. And I think that everything in between has been quite good. It's just being better, not letting goals in and scoring our chances. And I think we'll be just fine.
Primary transfer window comes and goes. 2 additions are made, both from SKC, ironically enough, which is kind of a rival of RSL's that battled for the cup back in the day. So tell me what sort of kind of access or what sort of experience you've had so far communicating with Willie and Johnny, and what are you guys hoping that those 2 acquisitions do for your team?
Yeah, I think it gives us a big boost offensively, getting Willie and Johnny into the team. I think that this past game, Willie showed a little bit of his ability, and I think that it's very promising what he brings for the team. Johnny's still kind of getting going. He hasn't been training with the team. He's been a free agent, and so he might need a little bit, but, he's been producing in the league for the past 7 years or so, and he's a well-known name around the league. And so that experience that he brings to the team and, what he'll add to attack, I think will be really valuable going forward. We have had a little bit of difficulty producing as much as we'd like offensively. And so I think that these guys will be really helpful in that category.
What do you like to do, Sam, when you're not playing soccer? I read that you and your fiance like to foster animals. And at one point, am I reading correctly, that you had 12 cats in 2020?
Yeah, something crazy like that, just because we had, I think, a litter of kittens that was in the process of being adopted out. And then there was another litter of kittens that we were asked to foster, or else they were going to get put down. And, it was either we take them in or they were going to get put down that day. So we took them in, and there was a little bit of an overlap. And, but yeah, it's something that we're very passionate about. We love animals, not just cats and dogs, but we tend to foster or work with those animals. And otherwise, my fiance and I both really like nature. I like, walking around Ochre Lake with my dog. I hope to visit the national parks sometime soon when we get some days off in a row. And otherwise, I've enjoyed cooking some nice meals at home, cooking dinners with my fiance. We live right by Harmon's, and so being walking distance to a grocery store has made it much easier to go grab some things for dinner, and it's been a blast.
For all of our listeners, our RSL listeners, do you do the social media thing? Do you do the Instagram thing? I think the kids love the TikTok. Sam, is there anywhere that our listeners can go find your stuff?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram at sjunka.
All right, buddy. Well, congrats on that goal. It was quite a strike, and keep up the good work, and most importantly, stay healthy, okay?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sam Junka, RSL left back. He and Alex Catranas kind of battling for that position. Had a pretty stunning goal. I didn't know Sam had that in him. It was from, 25, 26 yards out. Beat the keeper, lower right-hand side, and was able to get that goal to help RSL get that 3-1 victory against San Diego. The road continues for RSL. They have been on the road for a while. 3 of the next 4 on the road. They're going to take on Vancouver, who's the best side in the West right now. Then they'll be in Dallas at Toyota Stadium. A quick trip back to Salt Lake, I guess I should say Sandy, to take on Portland. And then they'll be at Dick's Sporting Goods Park to take on Colorado. So 3 of the next 4 on the road for Real Salt Lake. All right, we got some breaking news coming up. Some former Utah football players have signed some undrafted free agent deals. We have a new transfer portal addition for Alex Jensen. And, of course, we have NBA playoffs to get to as well. We got one more hour of the program on this, not Wednesday, it's Monday. Try to jump ahead. So the Monday edition of The Drive continues coming up right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time, Monday afternoon style. 4 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. It's been an aggressively April day outside. It was rainy and chilly this morning. The sun was shining this afternoon. Now it is cloudy, and the weather is a little bit cooler on this Monday afternoon. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great weekend. And as it is, every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. We are going to get you ready for tonight's playoff action in pro basketball and talk a little Utah Jazz and some draft and some fun draft stories with Richard Smith. We'll bring Smitty in coming up in a bit. You know, Shedeur Sanders, the big story of the weekend was Shedeur Sanders sliding to the 5th round of the NFL draft. And ironically enough, it's interesting to consider the draft history of the Utah Jazz in our market. The best players that we've had here, for the most part, have been drafted later. Mid-first round, late lottery, late first round. John and Carl, of course. Players like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, Paul Millsap, second-round pick, Andre Karolinko, late in the first round. So these things do happen. Of course, a lot of the conversation today about why Shedeur actually slid. So we'll bring Smitty in to do some of that. We've got the Cavs and the Heat tipping off in Miami about 25 minutes from right now. And then the late-night game is going to be the Rockets and the Warriors. So that series right now, Golden State has a 2-1 lead. The breaking news is that the Golden State Warriors expect Jimmy Butler to play tonight in Game 4 after missing Game 3 with that pelvic contusion he suffered after the fall, Game 2 against Houston. So see if the Warriors can get it done. Some unfortunate news became official earlier today that our local legend, Weber State star Damian Lillard, I hate to say it, this might be it for Dame. He has officially torn his left Achilles tendon. Dame turns 35 this offseason, and he is on the books in Milwaukee for 2 more years. Cool $60 million next year, and I think it's 63 and change the year after that. So I don't know what Milwaukee's going to do, but of course, more than anything else, just feel bad for one of the most exciting players that ever spent any time here in the state of Utah playing basketball. So that broke a little bit earlier today that Dame is going to be out for probably all of next year, and we'll see if he comes back at all. Some breaking news, Don McHenry is transferring to Utah. Don McHenry, 17 points, 3 boards, 2 assists for Western Kentucky this year. So we've kind of been waiting to hear some news about the rest of the roster for Alex Jensen and his staff. So Utah basketball making an addition today. Dorian Singer, who went undrafted, like the majority of our local products, has signed a undrafted contract with the Las Vegas Raiders. So last week, no part of me thought we'd be sitting here today and talking about only Jalen Royals and Caleb Lohner as the 2 local college football players that were drafted. Some of the local high school guys were drafted. Jeffrey Boss, who played at Oregon, he was drafted. Jackson Hawes, who played at Highland, he was drafted. Some other players as well. But as far as the local scene, Jalen Royals was a 4th-round pick. He went to Kansas City. And Caleb Lohner drafted in the 7th round, and he went to the Denver Broncos. As far as some other players that have signed deals, Junior Tafuna has signed a deal with the Texans. Karene Reed also with the Broncos. Connor O'Toole got himself a nice little guaranteed chunk of change to go to Seattle. Zamiah Vaughn's going to try to make the team in Minnesota. And Mekhi Bernard will be with Tennessee. On the BYU side of things, Tyler Batty is going to be in Minnesota. Caleb Etienne will be with the Bengals. And Jacob Robinson signed a deal with the San Francisco 49ers. So, a lot going on. NFL draft kind of takeaways. The college football transfer portal is now closed. Zach Williams ended up at USC, left Utah as a wide receiver. He ended up at USC. And so we'll see what Utah is able to bring in as far as talent goes with a wide receiver group prior to the start of the season come fall. All right, I want to tell you guys about a really exciting thing we're going to do on Friday. We will be out and about on remote with our good friends at the Fulmer Legacy Center, So a legacy fulfilled. It's the grand opening of the Fulmer Legacy Center. So come on out and check out this new facility. They've been working really, really hard to get this done. The address is 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan. It's a milestone, 40 years in the making, and it will be realized on Friday, May the 2nd, as the Fulmer Legacy Foundation celebrates the official grand opening of the Fulmer Legacy Center. It's located in the South Jordan Sports Complex. The event is going to run from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., but we're going to be there up until 6 p.m., so you guys can come by. A ribbon-cutting ceremony will start at 11 a.m. They're giving tours of the new facility and appearances by local leaders, dignitaries, and sports personalities. The Fulmer Legacy Center is going to serve as a hub for amateur boxing, youth mentorship, and community health programming, including fitness boxing for women, seniors, and individuals living with Parkinson's. Of course, the Fulmer brothers, known around the world for their success in professional boxing, as well as their humble grit, spent decades mentoring hundreds of at-risk kids after retiring from professional boxing. So again, coming up on Friday, we will be out and about at the Fulmer Legacy Center at 10960 South Park Road in South Jordan. We would love to see you. Come on by and say hello. All right, big night in the NBA. Of course, we'll do some NBA lottery and some Jimmy Butler expected to play for the Golden State Warriors tonight as the Warriors are trying to take a 3-1 lead over the Houston Rockets. Unfortunately, Damian Lillard, it was confirmed earlier today that he has torn his left Achilles tendon in the Bucks' loss to the Pacers over the weekend. So we got some NBA playoffs tonight, some Stanley Cup playoff action as well. Of course, the Utah Hockey Club, high-speed head their offseason, and hopefully Bill Armstrong can make a couple of additions to the team to take the right step in the right direction. I think they've got about $8 million to play with, fifth most cap space in the NHL. They got the 14th pick in the first round of the NHL draft, then their own second, third, and fourth round pick. So there you go. All right, Porter, right, football guy. Of all the Utes that did not get drafted, which one surprised you the most?
That's a good question. I don't know that I was entirely surprised with a whole lot of them except Junior Tafuna. I thought that Junior would be a mid-round or late-round draft pick. I thought there was little doubt about that. I thought there was even littler doubt about that when he showed well at senior days, senior camps, stuff like that. But this was a really, really good class when it comes to a lot of the interior defensive linemen, a lot of the interior offensive linemen. So these teams that were building up their insides, man, there was a long list of both defensive tackles and guards and centers on the offensive side. So that was kind of the story. It was Junior Tafuna, a guy that would have been drafted in, Spence, I would say 80% of the years, 80% of NFL draft classes. He's going to go late round and maybe even earlier, but this was one of the outliers there.
Yeah, and oftentimes, as we've talked about, I always go back to that anecdote, the anecdotal story I share when Trevor Riley was drafted, and I think it was the 7th round by my Jets. I sent him this text. I'm like, dude, congrats, that's awesome. And he sent me an expletive-laden text in return about how pissed he was because he wanted to choose his landing spot. If you're going to go in the 6th or the 7th round, you might, like Connor O'Toole got a nice guaranteed deal to go play for Seattle. You might have the preference of choosing where you play instead of being told where you live.
Yeah, a little inside there. I was in the know when it comes to Britton Covey's situation during that process, and it was kind of the same situation where at the end of the draft, we were actually sitting in a room hoping he didn't get drafted, which is kind of a weird feeling because he had a promise at that point for a couple of different teams that he felt really comfortable with the situations, one of those being the Philadelphia Eagles. Ended up okay for the guy. So that's a pretty common situation in some draft situations, and yeah, it happens more than you think.
We should get Britton Covey on the radio show.
I know, right? apparently busy guy lately.
Do I need to book that? Because he claims that he's down.
I know.
Is he lying to me?
Britton, and listen, it's my guy. It's our guy.
Of course.
He is and would love to do it, I'm sure. He's just sometimes a little tough to nail down.
All right.
But we'll get him on the show. He has promised. He's promised you. He's promised me. And he has a golf tournament he wants to push. So we'll make that happen. The real holdup is I've been trying to get in the studio.
Fair enough.
We'll make it work.
Don McHenry is your newest member of the Utah men's basketball program. The news was announced about 2 hours ago. 17 points, 3 boards, 2 assists for Western Kentucky. Dorian Singer has signed an undrafted deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. So a little bit of breaking news as we sign off for this Monday. All right, Porter, what comes our way on a busy Tuesday edition of the show? On a Tuesday show, Tim McMahon stops by for the NBA Daily Assist, of course, talking NBA playoffs and the latest in the association. Kalen Jones, our old friend, bunch of different stops Kalen's had, but currently right now doing Untold with Netflix on the sports side. Dave Fox stops by as he does each and every other Tuesday, and then we'll hit some NFL draft topics. Apparently those guys are pretty busy these last 48 hours, so we'll hopefully talk with either Thor Nystrom or potentially Field Yates tomorrow. Nice. Working on some times with those guys. So we'll continue the draft coverage. Field Yates, the human boat shoe. Boat shoe. Yeah. Right? Like he does seem like Sperry's. A lot of aggressive vineyard vines for our guy Field Yates. Yes. You knew a lot of Field Yates growing up. Oh, I did. Surrounded by them. Yes, nice no guy. Doubt. Oh, yeah, great. And does a really good job. Be great to I've never interviewed Field. That'd be fun. All right, we'll say goodnight. Special thank you today to Matt Brown, to Richard Smith, to Sam Junka, as well as the legend himself, John Paul, JP Chunga. For any of the sound you may miss from the program today, the website, ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. The ESPN 700 app is available for free in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space for 4 hours every afternoon, check out our podcast page, which is called, wait for it, The Drive with Spence Checketts, available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, and say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It does help. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy some good playoff basketball tonight. We'll talk to you on a Tuesday Drive. As always, you know where to find that. It's right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.